Harper Audio presents Wisdom of the Ages, written and read by Wayne W. Dyer. In my mind, I can picture what the world was like in other times. And I am fascinated by what those people who lived before us might have felt in their hearts. To imagine that Pythagoras, Buddha, Jesus Christ, Michelangelo, Shelley, Shakespeare, Emerson, and so many of those we revere as our teachers and spiritual leaders actually walked on the same ground, drank the same water, watched the same moon, and were warmed by the same sun as I am today, is a thought that intrigues me considerably. Even more intriguing is what these greatest minds of all times would like us to know. I have come to the conclusion that in order to effect deep inner spiritual change in our world, we need to know and live in our personal lives the wisdom these eminent teachers from our past have left us. Many of these profound teachers were considered troublemakers, and some were even put to death for their beliefs. Their teachings, however, could never be silenced, as evidenced by the variety of topics from differing historical eras, which are in this recording. Their words live on, and their advice for having a deeper and a richer experience of life is here for you to listen to and apply. This collection is a compendium of the wisdom from those topics and times, and what I feel those wise and creative thinkers are telling us now about how to create deep inner spiritual change. In a sense, those of us who now occupy planet Earth are in many ways connected to all of those who lived here before us. We may have new technologies and modern conveniences, but we still share the same heart space, and the same energy or life force that flowed through their bodies now flows through ours. It is to this mind picture and shared energy that this recording is dedicated. What do these ancestral scholars, who we consider to be the wisest and most spiritually advanced, have to say to us today, here and now? Their observations of life's greatest lessons are in the prose, poetry, and speeches which they left for us to read and listen to. Though they lived in a separate time with quite different living conditions, they still speak to you and to me. In essence, these brilliant minds of our past are still with us in the form of their words. I have chosen to highlight many of our ancestral teachers, all of whom command my admiration and respect. They are a diverse group representing ancient, medieval, Renaissance, early modern, and modern times from all around our world. Some lived into their 90s, and others died in their early 20s. Male, female, black, white, Native American, Far Eastern, Middle Eastern, scholars, soldiers, scientists, philosophers, poets, and statesmen, they are here, and they have something to say to you personally. I have chosen each piece in a way that explains how these noble masters' works might benefit you directly, here and now. Each contribution is designed to speak to you personally, with specific suggestions at the end of each short essay as to how you can implement their lessons in your life. It is my intention to provide you with insights from some of our most esteemed teachers that you can apply rather than learning their poetry and prose and passively concluding, well, that's nice for a literature or a humanities class, but that was then, and this is now. I recommend that you listen to each selection with an openness to the idea that these towering minds share the same divinity and life force as you do, and are talking to you directly in their own unique language and art form, and that you are going to apply their wisdom to your life beginning today. When you have completed this recording, use it as a reference guide. If you need a boost in patience or mercy or kindness and meditation or forgiveness or humility and leadership or prayer or anything else covered by our ancestral masters, then listen to that contribution. Work at applying the specific recommendations. Let your life be guided by greatness. To me, this is the way to teach poetry or prose or literature. Let it come alive. Let it shimmer in your mind, and then take that inner awakening and put it to work. All of us are deeply grateful to those who make life throb to a swifter, stronger beat. These great teachers from the past have done that for me, and I encourage you to apply this language of the heart from the wisdom of the ages to your life. God bless you. Pythagoras once wrote, "Learn to be silent. Let your quiet mind listen and absorb." And during the 1600s, Blaise Pascal wrote these words: "All man's miseries derive from not being able to sit quietly in a room, alone." This is the only piece in this collection of great contributors in which I have elected to highlight two writers on the same subject. I've selected two men whose lives were separated by over 2 millennia, both of whom in their own times were considered to be the most knowledgeable in the rational fields of mathematics and science. Pythagoras, whose writings influenced the thought of Plato and Aristotle, was a major contributor to the development of both mathematics and Western rational philosophy. Blaise Pascal, a famous French mathematician, physicist, and religious philosopher who lived 22 centuries after Pythagoras, is considered to be one of the original scientific minds. He is responsible for inventing the syringe, the hydraulic press, and the first digital calculator. Keeping in mind the left-brain scientific leanings of these two scientists, listen again to their two quotes. Pascal: "All man's miseries derive from not being able to sit quietly in a room, alone." Pythagoras: "Learn to be silent. Let your quiet mind listen and absorb." They both speak to the importance of silence and the value of meditation in your life, whether you are an accountant or an avatar. They send us a valuable message about a way of being in life that is not popularly encouraged in our culture. This is, that there is tremendous value in creating alone time in your life that is spent in silence. If you want to shed your miseries, learn to silently sit in a room alone and meditate. It has been estimated that the average person has 60,000 separate thoughts each and every day. The problem with this is that we have the same 60,000 thoughts today that we had yesterday, and will repeat them again tomorrow. Learning to be quiet and meditate involves figuring out a way to enter the spaces between your thoughts, or the gap, as I call it. In this silent, empty space between your thoughts, you can find a sense of total peace in a realm that is ordinarily unknowable. Here, any illusion of your separateness is shattered. Most of us have minds that race full speed day and night. Our thoughts are a hodgepodge of continuous dialogue about schedules, money worries, sexual fantasies, grocery lists, drapery problems, concerns about the children, vacation plans, and on like a merry-go-round that never stops. Those 60,000 thoughts are usually about ordinary daily activities and create a mental pattern which leaves no space for silence. This pattern reinforces our cultural belief that all gaps in conversation need to be filled quickly. For many, silence represents an embarrassment and a social defect. Therefore, we learn to jump in to fill these spaces, regardless of whether our filler has any substance or not. Silent periods in a car or at a dinner are perceived as awkward moments, and good conversationalists know how to get those spaces occupied with some kind of noise. And so it is with ourselves as well. We have no training in silence, and we see it as unwieldy and confusing. Thus we keep the inner dialogue going just like the outer. Yet it is in that silent place where our ancient teacher Pythagoras tells us to let our quiet mind listen and absorb, that confusion will disappear and enlightened guidance will come to us. But meditation also affects the quality of our non-silent activities. The daily practice of meditation is the one single thing in my life that gives me a greater sense of well-being, increased energy, higher productivity, at a more conscious level, more satisfying relationships, and a closer connection to God. The mind is like a pond. On the surface you see all of the disturbances, yet the surface is only a fraction of the pond. It is in the depth below the surface, where there is stillness, that you will come to know the true essence of the pond, as well as your own mind. By going below the surface, you come to the spaces between your thoughts, where you are able to enter the gap. The gap is total emptiness, or silence. These two pioneering scientists, who are still quoted today in university courses, were studying the nature of the universe. They struggled with the mysteries of energy and pressure and mathematics and space and time and universal truth. Their message to all of us here is quite simple. If you want to understand the universe, or your own personal universe, then be quiet and face your fear of sitting in a room alone and going deep within the layers of your own mind. It is the space between the notes that makes the music. Without that emptiness, that silence in between, there is no music, only a noise. You too are silent, empty space at your center, surrounded by form. To break through that form and discover your very creative nature that is in the center, you must take the time to become silent each day and enter that rapturous space between your thoughts. No amount of my talking about the value of daily meditation will ever convince you. You will never know the value of this practice unless you make the commitment to do it. My purpose in speaking to you about this subject on the value of meditation is not to tell you how to meditate. There are many fine courses of study, manuals, and audio guides to give you instruction. My purpose here is to emphasize that meditation is not something that is exclusively for spiritual seekers who want to while away the hours and days of their lives in deep contemplation, oblivious to productivity and social responsibility. Meditation is a practice advocated by those who live by their faith in reason, by number crunchers and authors of theorems and Pascal's law. You may feel much as Blaise Pascal did when he wrote, "The eternal silence of those infinite spaces terrifies me." Here are some suggestions for overcoming your terror and learning to be silent and able to sit quietly in a room alone. 1. Practice noticing your in and out breaths as a way to cultivate turning inward to the silent self. You can do this in the midst of meetings or conversations, even parties. Just notice and follow your breathing for a few moments, many times during your day. 2. Give yourself time this day to simply sit in a room alone and observe your mind. Keep track of the various thoughts that enter and exit and lead to the next thought. Your awareness of the frenetic activity of your mind will help you to transcend the frenzied pace of thoughts. And 3. Read a book on meditation to learn how the practice can be initiated, or join a meditation group. 4. There are many CDs and tapes available to guide you in meditation. Find one that appeals to you. I have published one called Meditations for Manifesting, in which I teach a specific meditation called japa. I guide you through a morning and evening meditation using my voice to assist you in repeating the sounds of the divine. And all profits from the sale of this CD go to charity. Founder of one of the world's major religions, Buddha was born Prince Siddhartha in northeast India, near the borders of Nepal. Seeing the unhappiness, sickness, and death that even the most powerful and wealthiest are subject to in this life, at age 29, he abandoned the life he was living in search of a higher truth. The name Buddha is actually a title that translates to the Awakened One, or the Enlightened One. This is the title given to Siddhartha Gautama, who left behind the princely life at the age of 29 and went on a lifelong search for religious understanding and a way of release from the human condition. It is said that he discarded the teachings of his contemporaries, and through meditation he achieved enlightenment or ultimate understanding. From then on, he assumed the role of teacher, instructing his followers in the Dharma, or truth. His teachings became the basis for the religious practice of Buddhism, which has played a major role in the spiritual, cultural, and social life of the Eastern world, and much of the Western world as well. I have deliberately chosen not to speak on the tenets of Buddhist doctrine, but rather to take this often quoted passage of the Buddha and relate its significance to you and me today, some 25 centuries after the death of the Enlightened One. He said it like this: "Do not believe what you have heard. Do not believe in tradition because it is handed down many generations. Do not believe in anything that has been spoken of many times. Do not believe because the written statements come from some old sage. Do not believe in conjecture. Do not believe in authority or teachers or elders. But, after careful observation and analysis, when it agrees with reason, and it will benefit one and all, then accept it and live by it." The key word in the passage is believe. In fact, the key phrase is, do not believe. Everything that you carry around with you that you call a belief has become your own largely because of the experiences and testimonies of other people. And if it comes to you from a source outside of yourself, regardless of how persuasive the conditioning process might be, and irrespective of how many people just like you have worked to convince you of the truth of these beliefs, the fact that it is someone else's truth means that you receive it with some question marks or doubts. If I were to attempt to convince you about the taste of a delectable fish, say, you would perhaps listen but still have your doubts. Were I to show you pictures of this fish, and furthermore have hundreds of people come to testify about the veracity of my statements, you might become even more convinced. But that modicum of doubt would still remain because you hadn't tasted it yet. You might accept the truth of its deliciousness for me, but until your taste buds experience the fish, your truth is only a belief based upon my truth or my experience. And so it is also with all of the well-meaning members of your tribes and their tribal ancestors before them. Just because you've heard it, and it is a long surviving tradition, and it is recorded over the centuries, and the world's greatest teachers have endorsed it, is still not a reason to accept a belief. Remember, do not believe it as Buddha instructs. Rather than using the term belief, try shifting to the word knowing. When you have the direct experience of tasting the fish, you now have a knowing. That is, you have made conscious contact and can determine your truth based upon your own experience. You know how to swim or how to ride a bicycle, not because you have a belief about it, but because you have had the direct experience. You are being reminded directly by the Enlightened One of 2,500 years ago to apply this same understanding to your spiritual practices. There is a fundamental difference between knowing something and knowing about something. Knowing about something is another term for belief. Knowing is a term reserved exclusively for direct experience. The Buddha offers you some great advice, and you can see that his conclusion is devoid of the word believe. He says, when it agrees with reason, that is, when you know it to be true based on your own observation and experience, and it is beneficial to one and all, then and only then, live by it. Throughout this recording, I offer you a summation of some of the most famous and creative genius minds of all times. I encourage you to do the same thing with all of the words that have come to you from beyond this contemporary world as with the words that have been handed down many generations. First and foremost, try the advice in this recording. Ask yourself how it equates with your own reason and common sense. And if it benefits you and others, then live by it. That is, make it your knowing. Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching, which means the way. It is the basis for the religious practice of Taoism. Listen to his wisdom from the 6th century BC. He says, "True leaders are hardly known to their followers. Next after them are the leaders the people know and admire. After them, those they fear. After them, those they despise. To give no trust is to get no trust. When the work's done right, with no fuss or boasting, ordinary people say, 'Oh, we did it ourselves.'" I am frequently amazed at how many contemporary politicians refer to themselves as our leaders by virtue of the fact that they hold public office. Historically, it is clear that public office holders are seldom the true leaders causing change. For instance, who were the leaders of the Renaissance? Were they the public office holders? Were the leaders the mayors, governors, and presidents of the European capitals? No, indeed. The leaders were the artisans, writers, and musicians who listened to their hearts and souls and expressed what they heard, leading others to discover a resonating voice within themselves. Ultimately, the entire world listened with a new awareness, which was responsible for the triumph of human dignity over tyranny. True leaders are rarely the officials who are addressed by a title. Consider what titles you are known by and how you attempt to live up to them. You may carry the title of mother or father, which is an awesome responsibility. When your advice is sought because the children see you as a leader in the family, keep in mind that what you truly want them to be able to say is, "I did it myself," rather than give you credit. Seek to enhance your leadership qualities by being constantly alert to the mistake of thinking that your title makes you a leader. True leaders are not known by titles. It is ego who loves titles. Helping others to become leaders while exercising your own true leadership qualities means having to work hard at suspending ego's influence. True leaders enjoy the trust of others, which is very different than enjoying the perks and flattery and power that ego insists are the signs of being a leader. You need to give trust to others in order to receive that trust. Notice the times that you are inclined to insist that others do it your way or take the highway. Lao Tzu tells us that the leader with this attitude is the least effective and most despised. Your leadership style may tend to create fear with statements like, "I'll punish you if you don't do it my way." Lao Tzu tells us that fear-based leaders are poorly qualified to genuinely lead. The leader whose motivation is to bask in admiration, according to Lao Tzu, is still not a master at leading. This style might say, "I'll give you a reward if you do it the way I want you to." The true leader acts in such a way as to be hardly known in the entire process. This leader offers trust, encouragement, and congratulations as others find their own way. When our lawmakers tell us what we need, or use scare tactics to predict dire consequences, or attempt to get us to act out of admiration for their leadership, they are not true leaders. To qualify as true leaders, they must silence themselves and hear the populace express, "Yes, we created this great economy ourselves." And so it is with you also. To be a true leader in your own life and in the lives of others, practice resisting the need to be recognized. Lead unobtrusively, offering trust whenever possible. Gently smile at your ego's desire to take credit and silently acknowledge your true leadership when you hear others say, "Oh yes, we did that ourselves." Here are a few suggestions for applying the wisdom of Lao Tzu. 1. Before acting, stop and ask yourself if what you are about to say is going to create hate or fear or admiration or self-awareness. Then choose to nurture self-awareness. 2. Act on your desire to be a true leader by being as quietly effective as possible. Catch someone doing something right. And finally, become aware that it is the ego part of you that is suggesting you are a failure. Rather than seeing yourself as a failure when no credit comes your way, remind yourself that you have succeeded as a leader and good-naturedly let your ego know that this is the way to successful leadership. Confucius was a Chinese teacher and philosopher whose philosophy strongly influenced Chinese life and culture for over 2,000 years. He had this to say about patience. Do not be desirous of having things done quickly. Do not look at small advantages. Desire to have things done quickly prevents their being done thoroughly. Looking at small advantages prevents great affairs from being accomplished. I have this quote of the ancient Chinese teacher and philosopher Confucius pasted above my typewriter as a gentle daily reminder to not do anything that will prevent great affairs from being accomplished. It seems to me that we have a great deal to learn from our nature about how we hinder our greatness. Yet it is our nature that we often ignore in favor of what our mind tells us is the way things ought to be. Patience is a key ingredient in the process of the natural world and in our personal world. For instance, if I scrape my arm or break a bone, the healing process proceeds precisely at its own pace, independent of any opinion I might have about it. That is the natural world at work. My desire to have it fixed quickly is of absolutely no consequence. If I imply that impatience of my personal world, I will prevent it from healing thoroughly, as Confucius advised over 25 centuries ago. Shakespeare's observation matches the wisdom of this ancient Chinese predecessor when Shakespeare wrote, "How poor are they that have not patience? What wound did ever heal but by degree?" When I was a child, I remember planting some radish seeds at springtime. When early summer arrived, I noticed green leafy shoots protruding above the ground, and I watched them grow a bit taller each day, and finally I couldn't stand it any longer, and I began to tug at those radish shoots, trying to get them to grow faster. I had not yet learned that nature reveals her secrets on her own time schedule. As I pulled at the tiny little leaves, they emerged from the ground sans radishes, and my childish impatience to have this thing done quickly prevented it from happening at all. Now, when I am asked if I am disappointed because one of my books did not appear on a bestseller list as my earlier books did, I think of this observation of the wise Chinese sage: great things have no fear of time. What a compliment it is to the genius of Confucius that his words are still being quoted and his knowledge still applied 2,500 years after his departure. I too write for those souls who have yet to materialize, and if that means sacrificing the small advantage of a position of prestige on a list somewhere today, my impatient ego may be puzzled, but I am content. Impatience breeds fear and stress and discouragement. Patience manifests in confidence, decisiveness, and a feeling of peaceful satisfaction. As you look at your own life, examine how frequently you demand an immediate indicator of success for yourself and others, and attempt instead to see the larger picture. When you are on purpose and see the larger picture, you are able to let go of an inclination to seek validation in the form of merit badges and immediate applause. The author of the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, lived in India probably 1 to 3 centuries ago and is considered to be the person who established the tradition of meditation. He has been described as a mathematician of mysticism and an Einstein in the world of the Buddhas. About inspiration, he has this to say: when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, great, and wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents become alive, and you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. In the 2nd century before Christ, a man considered to be a saint by his people wrote a Hindu classic titled Yoga Sutras under the pseudonym Patanjali. In this particular book, he laid out in 4 volumes a categorization of yogic thought. His treatises inform readers about samadhi, the practice of yoga, psychic power, and liberation. The words of this mystic and the sutras or methods he offered on how to know God and how to achieve a heightened level of awareness are considered by many to be the original foundation for building a spiritual base and liberating oneself from the limitations of the body and the ego. I have selected this particular passage of Patanjali because I believe it expresses a universal truth across the miles and eons of time. He explains that when we become truly inspired by something that we consider to be extraordinary, then truly extraordinary things will begin to happen for us, particularly in our thought processes. Somehow, when we become intensely involved in what we truly love to do, our thoughts begin to change, and they lose that quality of feeling limited in any way. From my own personal experience, I know that I feel most on purpose in my life when I am speaking to an audience and when I am writing. I have a deep sense of being used in some way at those moments, as if it isn't really this physical body called Wayne Dyer that is producing the talk or the book. In those moments, I notice that my mind does not contemplate the concept of limitation. I know that I am not alone, and that divine guidance is with me, and I speak or write effortlessly. It seems to me that the body and the mind are in a state of harmony during these moments. Some have called this state flow, others peak experience. Patanjali describes it as your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, great, and wonderful world. As you listen to these words, keep in mind the timelessness of this advice. Even those living in pre-modern times knew the significance of being on purpose in life. At the moments of peak experience, these inspired moments of feeling at one with God and the entire universe, you experience life as truly wonderful. This occurs when you are involved at a level that is called inspirational. Your attention is not on what is wrong or missing, but on that balanced feeling that comes from being in spirit. You are co-creating with spirit. Patanjali then speaks of what I consider to be the most phenomenal aspect of being in this state of inspirational grace. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents become alive, he tells us. This means that many of the things which we thought were outside of our power to manifest awaken within us. I have found that when I am truly inspired in some extraordinary project, I forget about fatigue, despite an absence of sleep. I find that I don't think about being hungry, and in fact my body just seems to cease all of its incessant demands and shifts into a state of moving me through my work effortlessly. Jet lag disappears when I am centered in my activity, despite crossing 8 or 9 time zones in a single day. I think the use of the term dormant forces is very critical here. When you're in that centered state of purpose, you activate forces in the universe that previously were out of your range. What you need will show up. The right person will be there on time. The phone call that you wanted will come. The missing pieces will be brought to you. You begin to manage the coincidences of your life, which sounds paradoxical. But when you enlist spirit by being inspired, the ancient Zen proverb applies. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Inside of you is a greater person that you may ever have dreamed of. Patanjali suggests that that person emerges when you are inspired by the extraordinary. Keep in mind that your job here is not to ask how, but instead to say yes. Open yourself to the ideas presented in this passage. Ask yourself, when do I feel most fulfilled? When do I feel extraordinary and like a great person? Whatever the answer to those questions, you will find that it has something to do with serving your fellow man, serving your planet, or your universe, or serving God. As you let the ego diminish and make the commitment to be inspired and involved in an extraordinary project that does not just benefit your ego, you will know what to do. To put Patanjali's powerful ideas to work for you, try these suggestions on. 1. Record in some form the activities of your life in which you feel most in spirit, that is, inspired. Don't judge them as being too insignificant or without value. If it's playing with babies, or gardening, or tinkering with your automobile, or singing, or meditating, simply keep a log of these activities. Then 2. Use the above-mentioned inventory to see who out there in the world is actually making a living doing these things every day. Whatever you love can be turned into an extraordinary project to expand your consciousness in every direction. Mobilize new forces and talents in yourself that send you the message that you are a much greater person than you ever imagined yourself to be. And 3, listen only to the voice within you that beckons you to that extraordinary activity. Filter out advice from those who are telling you what they think you should be doing with your life. The key is to become inspired from within, not from without. And 4, remember the words of Emerson as you break the bondage of your conditioned way of thinking about yourself and your life's purpose. The measure of mental health is the disposition to find good everywhere. Try it and see how those faculties and talents come alive. Roman orator, statesman, and man of letters, Cicero was Rome's greatest orator and its most articulate philosopher. The last years of Republican Rome are often referred to as the Age of Cicero. Listen to his list of the 6 mistakes of man. 1. The illusion that personal gain is made up of crushing others. 2. The tendency to worry about things that cannot be changed or corrected. 3. Insisting that a thing is impossible because we cannot accomplish it. 4. Refusing to set aside trivial preferences. 5. Neglecting development and refinement of the mind and not acquiring the habit of reading and study. And 6. Attempting to compel others to believe and live as we do. You know, it absolutely amazes me when I consider that over 2,000 years ago our ancestors were speaking and writing of the identical concerns we all share today. Cicero was once called the father of his country. He was a brilliant orator, a lawyer, statesman, a writer, a poet, a critic, and a philosopher who lived in the immediate century before the birth of Christ and was momentously involved in all of the conflicts that occurred between Pompey, Caesar, Brutus, and many of the other historical characters and events that made up ancient Roman history. He had a brilliant and long political career and was also an established writer whose work was considered to be the most influential of its time. In those days, however, dissidents were not treated kindly. Cicero was executed in 43 BC. His head and hands were displayed on the speaker's platform at the Forum in Rome. In one of his most memorable treatises, Cicero outlined the 6 mistakes of man as he saw them evidenced in ancient Rome. 20 centuries later, I repeat them here with a brief commentary. Mistake number 1, the illusion that personal gain is made up of crushing others. Think about this. There are 2 ways to have the tallest building in town. One way is to go about crushing everyone else's building. But this method seldom works for long because those having their buildings leveled will eventually come back to haunt the crusher. The second way is to work on your own building and watch it grow. And so it is in politics, business, and our own individual lives. Mistake number 2, the tendency to worry about things that cannot be changed or corrected. Apparently, people spent their energies worrying about things they had no control over in the ancient world, and little has changed since. One of my teachers put it to me quite succinctly. He said, first, it makes no sense to worry about the things you have no control over, because if you have no control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And second, it makes no sense to worry about the things you do have control over, because if you have control over it, it makes no sense to worry about it. And there goes everything that it is possible to worry about. Either you have control or you don't, and either way, worry is a huge mistake. Mistake number 3, insisting that a thing is impossible because we cannot accomplish it. Too often we jump to the conclusion that something is impossible simply because we cannot see the solution. I've heard many people tell me that angels and reincarnation, soul travel, communication with the deceased, travel at the speed of light, miraculous spontaneous healings, and so on, are all impossibilities, simply because they cannot conceive of such ideas. I wonder how many of Cicero's contemporaries could foresee telephones and fax machines, computers, automobiles, airplanes, missiles, electricity, running water, remote controls, walking on the moon, and so many of the things we take for granted today. A good motto is, no one knows enough to be a pessimist. What we can't fathom today will be the accepted reality of those who reside here 2,000 years into the future. Mistake number 4, refusing to set aside trivial preferences. So many of us major in minor subjects as our way of life. We allow our precious life energies to be spent on what others think of us, petty concerns about appearance, or what labels we are wearing. We consume our lives in anguish over squabbles with family or co-workers. Ego becomes the driving force of our lives, with our self-importance persistently taking center stage. We see hunger and starvation on our planet, but become impatient when we must wait 5 extra minutes for a table in a restaurant, where half of the food will be discarded as garbage. We hear about children maimed and killed by guns and gunmen by the thousands, yet we accept it as a condition that we can do nothing about. In our personal lives, too many of us believe that we are unable to make a difference on the larger issues. Mistake number 5, neglecting development and refinement of the mind and not acquiring the habit of reading and study. It seems that when we finish our formal schooling, we've completed our development of the mind. We have adopted the credo of reading and studying for the purpose of taking the examination and earning our merit badge in the form of a diploma or an advanced degree. Once the certificate is in hand, the need to study and refine the mind is terminated. Cicero must have noticed this same tendency among his fellow Roman citizens, and he warned them that it could predict the downfall of their empire. And so it came to pass. Our lives are greatly enriched when we immerse ourselves in literature and spiritual writing, not because we're going to be tested, but purely for the sake of personal enrichment. You will find that daily reading and study provide you with a deeper and a richer experience of life in all ways. This is particularly gratifying when you know that you're doing it out of choice, rather than as an assignment. And mistake number 6, attempting to compel others to believe and live as we do. Too often we feel victimized by those who are imposing upon us their views of what we should be doing and how we should be living. The result is a high state of tension and resentment. No one wants to be told how to live or what to do. One of the specific traits of highly functioning people is that they have no desire or investment in controlling other people. We need to remind ourselves of this truth and take the advice of Voltaire in his last line of Candide. Learn to cultivate your own garden. If others want to grow cabbage and you choose to grow corn, then so be it. Yet there is this propensity to peer into the lives of others and insist that they believe and care in the same way we do. It is a common mistake of families to impose their will on everyone else in the unit. It is also a common mistake of government officials who are determining what is best for everyone. From ancient Rome, Cicero, the great statesman, orator, writer, and philosopher, gives us all a lesson in living. Don't make these same mistakes that mankind has been making throughout the centuries. Instead, vow to eliminate them from your life, one day at a time. Born between the years 4 and 6 BC and crucified about AD 28, Jesus Christ is one of the world's major religious figures and is regarded as the Messiah predicted by the Old Testament prophets. On being childlike, Jesus said these words, "Except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven." Recently, while preparing to give a lecture in a town far from home, I had the strange experience of looking directly into a wall mirror while sitting at a desk. The entire wall was one gigantic mirror, and every time I looked up, there was this body looking back at me while I was writing in a notepad. Finally, I just stopped and stared back. I couldn't grasp the fact that this was actually me reflected in the mirror. I remember saying to myself, "That's an old man in there who's renting my face." The ageless child in me, my eternal, unchanging observer, knows nothing of judgment and hatred. There's nothing to judge, there's no one to hate. Why? Because that child inside doesn't see appearances. It only knows how to look with love on everything and everyone. It simply allows everything to be as it is and only notices the unfolding of God in everyone it encounters. Being without shape, size, color, or personality, this ageless, invisible child inside fails to notice such trivial distinctions. Consequently, that invisible, ageless child is always at peace, just witnessing, just observing, but most important, just allowing. Recently, I had the experience of running early one morning and feeling so exhilarated that I hurtled over a 3.5-foot fence as I came back to the hotel at the completion of my run. My wife, who was observing me, let out a scream and said to me, "You can't do that. You don't jump over fences when you're 56 years old. You could kill yourself." My immediate response to her was, "Oh, I forgot." That invisible, ageless me, who is my eternal observer, forgot for an instant that it was living in a body that has been here for over half a century. To me, this passage of Jesus from the New Testament speaks to the process of forgetting about our bodies as our primary identity, forgetting about our ethnic identity, our spoken language, our cultural labels, the shape of our eyes, or what side of the border we grew up on, then making that conversion to become as little children who are impervious to such compartmentalizing. Jesus was not saying we should be childish and become immature, undisciplined, and uneducated. Instead, he was referring to being childlike, which is non-judgmental, loving, accepting, and incapable of placing labels on anyone or anything. When we are able to be as little children, we realize that in every adult there is a child who desperately wants to be known. It is the child who is full and the adult who is usually empty. The fullness of the child is evident in peace, love, non-judgment, and allowing. The emptiness of the adult reveals itself in fear, anxiety, prejudgment, and fighting. Enlightenment can be seen as a process of remembering that in the heart of a little child there is purity, and it is this pure, divine love and acceptance that is the ticket to the kingdom of heaven. Make it one of your goals in life to be more childlike in everything you do. The quality that we apply to geniuses is the equivalent of the inquisitiveness of a child. Geniuses and children share a willingness to explore without thoughts of failure or worries about criticism. Italian painter, sculptor, architect, musician, engineer, mathematician, and scientist, Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest intellects in the history of mankind. He had this to say about balance. Every now and then go away, have a little relaxation, for when you come back to your work, your judgment will be surer. since to remain constantly at work will cause you to lose power of judgment. Go some distance away because the work appears smaller and more of it can be taken in at a glance, and a lack of harmony or proportion is more readily seen. When a man such as Leonardo da Vinci gives advice, I, for one, am willing to listen with fixed attention. He has been called by many historians the man with the most inquiring mind of all time. Now that's quite a compliment. His accomplishments were prodigious, and he is often credited with being the initiator of the Renaissance, which moved man out of the Dark Ages. Leonardo saw mystery everywhere and delved deep to understand it. He studied the earth, sky, and the heavens. He recorded the movement of stars and drew up plans for flying machines 400 years before the first airplane. He was an architect and a consummate artist who plunged into the study of nature and human personality. His portraits of faces were more skillful than had ever been seen before or since, embodying a reality that captured every essence of his subjects. His The Last Supper has had volumes of books written on the magnificence of this one painting alone. There was no subject that escaped Leonardo's inquiry, and in his advice regarding balance, he offers you a tool for your own creative outlets as well. It seems to me that highly productive people have a great sense of balance and harmony in their lives. They are thoroughly familiar with pacing and knowing when to retreat and clear their heads of the immediate concerns. The key word here is balance. To avoid being consumed by anything, you must be able to walk away from it. In the process of walking away, you begin to see your work or your family or your project from a perspective that appears smaller, according to Leonardo. The great Renaissance master is telling us to let go, relax, don't try so hard, remove the struggle and allow our natural divine guidance to assist us. He says, have a little relaxation, for when you come back to your work, your judgment will be surer. One way to do this in today's world is to learn to meditate before you undertake any serious pursuit, be it a plan for a business meeting, a job interview, giving a lecture, or painting a portrait. The very act of allowing yourself to go into a meditative state will improve your efficiency enormously. In the past 10 years, I have never gone before an audience without first spending a minimum of an hour, usually more, alone in a state of meditation. What I find in that state, particularly when I emerge from my relaxing meditation, is that I can walk out on the stage or pick up my pen with a sense of confidence that I am connected to a higher part of myself that knows no fear. I become an observer of myself doing the work, and everything seems to flow as if the hand of God is guiding my tongue or my pen. In the process of getting some distance between yourself and your work and relaxing into that space, you are inviting divine intervention into your activity. The less stress you place on yourself to accomplish or complete, ironically, seems to give you the power to do just that. Balance is what Leonardo da Vinci encouraged us to have in our life, regardless of our pursuits. By all means, get involved in your activities, but try to enjoy them for what they are, rather than the final outcome. Italian painter, sculptor, architect, and poet, this Renaissance artist, Michelangelo Buonarroti, is an outstanding figure in the history of the visual arts. Listen to these words he wrote in the 16th century. The greater danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. One of the more frequent criticisms I have received is that I offer far too much hope for people in dire circumstances and that this could be a dangerous thing. Despite this kind of fault-finding, I am still at a loss as to how having too much hope could be a dangerous thing. When people tell me of a medical diagnosis which implies no cure being possible, I encourage them to shift their aim to a completely opposite outcome. I talk frequently about the law which has allowed any miracle that has ever occurred since the inception of time to take place. I explain that this law has never been repealed and is still on the books. I cite cases of people who were told to go home and wait to die, who were given 6 months to live, and who freed themselves of their illnesses and their diagnoses. I receive mail every day from people who refuse to listen to the low aims and the low hopes that others have had for them, describing how grateful they were for a message of hope in difficult times. I believe that Michelangelo, who lived a few days shy of 89 years, still sculpting, painting, writing, and designing, in an age when 90 was about 60 years beyond normal life expectancy, was speaking to this idea of having very high hopes and aims in this famous quotation of his. The danger is not in false hope, rather it is in no hope or low hope, and consequently our objectives and aims are diminished by our belief before they can even be worked on and materialized. This not only concerns the overcoming of physical maladies, it includes virtually everything in our lives. The world is full of people who have aimed low and thought small, who want to impose this diminutive thinking on any who will listen to them. The real danger is the act of giving up or setting standards of smallness for ourselves with low expectations. Listen carefully to Michelangelo, the man who is considered by many to be the greatest artist of all time. I recall personally standing in front of the statue of David in Florence and being transfixed. The size, the majesty, the spirit that seemed to jump right out of the marble was Michelangelo saying to all of us, "Aim high." When he was asked how he could create such a masterpiece, he responded that David was already in the marble. He simply had to chip away the excess to allow him to escape. High aim indeed. And speaking of high, take a look sometime at the Sistine Chapel, where Michelangelo painted the ceiling by lying on his back and working every day for 4 years between 1508 and 1512, a project that lesser artists would have considered to be impossible. Yet Michelangelo took it on, and many more, in a lifetime crammed full of high energy, high talent, and yes, high aim. English poet and dramatist of the Elizabethan and early Jacobean period, William Shakespeare is the most widely known author in all of English literature. To read William Shakespeare is to become lost in his unprecedentedly rich and inventive use of the English language. I decided to present this selection on the quality of mercy from The Merchant of Venice because I feel these are the most profound and practical 14 lines ever written on this human attribute. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptered sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power doth then show like as God's, when mercy seasons justice. Living with a spirit of mercy and putting it to use each day is the way to tame our more base and primitive instincts while nurturing love and compassion. When we are hurt by others, our first impulse is usually to get even. Revenge rather than mercy is what our more savage side urges. Yet Shakespeare defines this quality of mercy, which he equates as an attribute of God, as it droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath, it is twice blessed. The first blessing of mercy or compassion is on you, the giver. This message summarizes much of the wisdom that the psychological literature has to offer. That is, be compassionate with yourself. Do not judge yourself harshly when you make a mistake or fail to live up to some standard. Be of such a mind that you can detach from the misconduct or failure and be gentle and loving with yourself. Forgive yourself for being so human as to have wandered around in your darker corners and emerged embarrassed or disappointed with your behavior. Give yourself mercy, a quality that Shakespeare says becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. And so it becomes you as well. When you take the first blessing of mercy and apply it to yourself, you then open to this potential of offering this quality to him that takes. If you are unable to give yourself authentic compassion, you will never be able to give it to another, any more than you can give love to another if you do not love yourself, or give money to the poor if you have none. This notion of giving mercy away is applicable in all of your relationships, in all areas of your life. Offering compassion to those who have harmed or disappointed you is not a case for being a victim. It is instead a way of saying, I understand, I care, I forgive, but I still do not like it, and I will not tolerate being treated this way or having you think it is acceptable. The difference is not needing to exact revenge or to prove one's superiority. With mercy in your heart, you will find yourself much less distracted and disheartened by the evil behaviors that you see and read about almost every day. You will be able to send the offenders love and not become obsessed with anger, hatred, and eventually the desire for revenge. Put the ideas of this passage by one of the world's greatest wordsmiths into your life by practicing the following. 1. Give yourself the compassion you deserve for any and all past actions. Stop judging yourself so harshly. All of those errors and wrong actions were necessary for you to get beyond that place in your life. Be kind to yourself and eliminate any ill feelings you harbor toward yourself. 2. Once you have stated how you feel and justice has been seen, then let go. Let go now. Don't hold on to grudges and use constant reminders to keep others in a state of guilt while maintaining your own dissonance as well. Let it go. And 3. Turn your most troublesome disturbances over to God. Simply say, Dear God, I find it so extremely difficult to give mercy in this situation, and I'm turning it over to you completely. I know you will guide me in acting in the most merciful and humane way. This action will free you from your own immobilization and anger and help you to see the saint in the sinner who have just been exchanging notes with each other. John Donne was an English poet noted as the first and one of the finest metaphysical poets. The paradoxical human union of spirit and matter was a recurring theme. Perhaps the one single quality that defines mysticism is the idea of oneness, which John Donne expresses so poignantly in this poem written in the early years of the 17th century. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. Therefore is the idea of oneness, which John Donne expresses so poignantly in this poem written in the early years of the 17th century. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if you, he, she, and they do not exist. John Donne is expressing essentially the same thought, no man is an island, in the first line of this very famous poem. In order to reach a higher state of awareness and bliss in our lives, we must understand the truth of that first line. That can only happen when our ego mind gets the message. Our ego mind insists that we are separate from others and defined by where our boundaries stop and others start. Similarly, these ego minds tell us that we are separate from our environment and that we are here to sort of push it around as we desire. Yet mystical teachers and poets are always reminding us of our connectedness and the oneness of everything and everyone. We must look beneath the surface and beyond appearances in order to grasp the unity consciousness they speak of. As we look at our body, it does appear to be a separate organism, but a closer look reveals a multitude of organs and rivers of fluids containing zillions of life forms with even more zillions of invisible bacteria, all working together to form this body. To rephrase John Donne's enduring contribution, no cell is an island entire of itself. Every cell is a piece of the body, a part of the main. If a life form be contaminated, the whole is the less. Any cell's illness or death diminishes me, because I am involved in the whole body. When you see yourself as connected to everyone, you immediately cease your judgment of the other and see that person connected via invisible threads, just as your ankles and your elbows share the same unseen life force. Therefore, compassion becomes an automatic reaction to everyone. You see all of humanity as one undivided and indivisible family. Once you can view all others as family members rather than competitors or traitors, you will reach out with love rather than with a weapon of defense or destruction. There was a time when I tended to view panhandlers holding up cardboard signs pleading for money with contempt, often saying to myself or anyone within earshot, why don't they go out and work for their money like I do? Now I remind myself that in some mysterious and yes, mystical way, I am connected to that person. Their poverty, uncleanliness, and ill health diminishes all of us, myself included. I send them a silent blessing and vow to do more to end such conditions on the planet, and most important, I feel more compassionate and loving in my heart. I am reminded how we all need each other and that our connections are much greater than the mere tribal connections of our immediate genetic families. Probably the most talented of all the English Romantic poets, John Keats gave up the study of medicine to write poetry. There is something in the universe that outlasts our individual mortal life. Whatever that something is perplexes all of us, and young John Keats writes about it poetically in his famous Ode on a Grecian Urn. As the poet contemplates the figures of the lovers on the Greek urn, he himself is grappling with mortality. His brother has recently died in his early 20s, and he struggles with his own ill health, which is to claim his life the following year at the age of 26. This poetic selection is the fifth and final stanza of Ode on a Grecian Urn. It concludes with 2 lines that summarize an approach to living that is transcendent and speaks to your own source of true happiness. Ode on a Grecian Urn. Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity, cold, pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. I think about the message in Keats' poem every day when I look outside the window of my office. 2 months ago, my son and I cleaned out a wooded area in front of the townhouse where I do my writing. We clipped bushes and chopped down dead trees and gave quite a drastic haircut to my entranceway. Right in front of my window, we left what appeared to be a dead, thin tree trunk with discolored bark standing about 3 feet high. We decided to dig it out the following day, since we didn't have a shovel handy. One thing led to another, and I had to leave town on a lecture tour, and we ignored the dead stick in the ground. When I returned, I noticed some green leaves sprouting from this dried-up protrusion, and I decided to forego the shovel. Today, as I look out my window, there are thousands of buds, green branches, and leaves covering the top of the dead stick in the ground. It's a beautiful sight to see. The life force, invisible to my eye, is the eternity that Keats refers to when he writes, "When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe." And yes, this thou is a friend to all of us who says, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. So what is your truth? First and most important, your truth is what is real for you. And what is real is what you experience with emotion or feeling. Thus, if you feel it, know it, and experience it, it is more than true. It is beauty made manifest. Your feelings of accomplishment are true and beautiful. Your appreciation of a loved one is true and beautiful. Your inspirations are true and thus beauteous. This invisible, eternal spark of life that Keats says is a friend to man is providing you with your truth. In my heart, I know that if we paved the entire surface of the planet, that thou that Keats refers to would cause a blade of grass to shoot up through the pavement. The eternal thou would spring up once again in bloom and beauty. It cannot be stopped. And that is the truth. It is also your truth. To paraphrase Keats, that on earth is all ye need to know. When a heart opens to the expression of truth as beauty, death of one of mankind's most troublesome enigmas is solved. Here is young John Keats, racked with tuberculosis in his early 20s, facing that his body will soon give up, yet opening to the beauty of the truth of life. See beauty in every place that you feel truth. That beauty and truth will supersede you. Know yourself and live your truth, and you will truly have beauty. It seems to me that John Keats was telling each of us in these enduring lines of poetry to know our truth, follow our hearts, and we will see beauty everywhere. To do otherwise is to lose our ability to appreciate and experience the ecstasy of life, that same invisible ecstasy that somehow manages to put life into a seed, a root, a blossom, even you. English philosophical poet Percy Bysshe Shelley rejected all conventions that he believed stifled love and human freedom and rebelled against the strictures of English politics and religion. Percy Bysshe Shelley's poetry was his legacy to all of us on the importance of passionately living our lives every day. No less an authority than the Encyclopedia Britannica described this English romantic poet by saying, his passionate search for personal love and social justice was gradually channeled from overt actions into poems that rank with the greatest in the English language. Living life passionately has its own tremendous rewards, which are intensified when one is aware that death, in its arbitrary way, can come at any unexpected moment, as it did for Shelley. Just think of this. Here was a man living in the beginning of the 19th century in England who risked his life distributing pamphlets advocating political rights and autonomy for Catholics in Ireland. He eloped at 19, betraying both families, lost his first wife to suicide when he was 24, and 2 of his children died when he was in his mid-20s. He then married his lover, Mary Wollstonecraft, fulfilling his desire for a life partner who can feel poetry and understand philosophy, as he put it. Shelley traveled all over Europe supporting himself by writing and publishing his poetry. He met with Lord Byron in various European cities for joint poetic endeavors and proclaimed that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world because they create human values and the forms that shape the social order. This man was a fervent idealist who wrote of his love for love and his passion for passion. He completed his enormous treasury of poetry and prose by the age of 29, when he died in a boating accident during a storm. Not only does his poetry speak to all of us of his enormous passion, but so does his life as well. He took up causes, risked his fame and his life, and drank up every moment of his life. The poem quoted here, titled Love's Philosophy, conveys a glimmer of the passion that Shelley felt in his idealistic heart. The fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single, all things by a law divine, in one spirit meet and mingle. Why not I with thine? See the mountains kiss high heaven, and the waves clasp one another. No sister flower would be forgiven if it disdained its brother. And the sunlight clasps the earth, and the moonbeams kiss the sea. What is all this sweet work worth, if thou kiss not me? This poem says to me, as does so much of his romantic poetry, feel the love for those you adore and express it with fervor, otherwise live your life in frustration. Love, the passionate variety, is that inner sense of longing that pervades every thought, every waking moment. It is a state of bliss that we usually equate with sexual or romantic feelings when they are ecstatically shared with our lover. All of that mingling and mixing and clasping and kissing between the rivers, winds, mountains, flowers, and moonbeams are Shelley's metaphors for that shared state of bliss. Why, he implies, would you choose the frustration of not expressing those feelings? I can recall the aching I have felt at various times in my own life for a love that I was unable to share with someone. I think I felt as though I'd died and gone to heaven when that love was made manifest by long embraces and kisses and union. But there is also passion in other circumstances, like the ecstasy of creation. When we consider the matter of having passion in our lives, it is important to pay attention to the things that we feel passionate about. Shelley speaks of a love and a joyful heart that is able to appreciate the beauty of our world and all of those we feel connected to. His is not exclusively a passion that keeps us enslaved to our sexual ecstasies. What he is describing is living your life not as if today were the first day of the rest of your life, but as if this were the only day of your life, which of course it is. And sharing your passion because a shared joy is a way of doubling one's joy. Too often we find ourselves bogged down in a serious approach to life, using our minds to keep us in a state of angst, or even worse, indifference. Joy and ecstasy come from within. They cannot be purchased at any price. We are all seeking joy and happiness, and often feeling it is not a proper state of mind when it arrives. The key to knowing this state is to put passion into your life. In your love and sex life, to be sure, but also your recreation, your vocation, and in all of your observations of yourself intermingling with this glorious universe. There is so much to be passionate about. I have found that people who have a passion or a strong will for what they want to achieve, and who do not allow others to smear or sully their inner pictures of what they want to manifest, always seem to get what it is they are desiring in their lives. Shelley lived out of his passionate idealism with every breath and heartbeat. His passion is reflected in his magnificent poetry. To put this passion to work into your own life, first, know that you are a part of a joyful universe, Allow your romantic, ecstatic, joyful emotions to appear more frequently in your daily life. When you feel joy, experience it and then express it. As it says in the New Testament, joy is the fruit of the Spirit. Don't deny yourself that fruit. Secondly, write your own poetry. Take the time to record your feelings of passion. Whether your passion is pottery or antique furniture, mathematics or music, express it in your own words. Third, give yourself permission to be a passionate person. Be passionate about anything or anyone you choose without interference from your inner critic. When that inner critic tries to make you feel foolish, gently but firmly tell it to wait for you in the lobby and invite it to rejoin you later if you want it. And fourth, tell those you love how you feel about them as often as possible. This will give you the opportunity to share your joy, and by doing so, doubling it. And finally, read and reread the poetry of passionate people like Shelley. Try to feel their heart beating with yours. Imagine yourself seeing and feeling what they saw before you even arrived on this planet. William Blake is one of my heroes. In his lifetime, he was a consummate poet, a painter, artist, a visionary mystic who was largely ignored by his contemporaries and considered to be mad. He lived his entire life on the edge of poverty and died in neglect. Yet today, this man is regarded as one of the most original and greatest figures in literary history, and his original engravings are rare treasures worth millions and millions of dollars. I have devoured his epic poems and quoted him extensively in my lifetime, and deciding what contribution of his to include in this collection has been a considerable challenge. His most famous words are the opening lines in Allegories of Innocence, written in 1803. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour, speaks to Blake's preoccupation with the power of the mind to perceive God or the infinite, the value of our imagination, and the oneness of the universe. I have spoken elsewhere in this collection on these themes, and so I have chosen A Poison Tree as another great example of what this madman genius, in quotes, offers you and me today, from his creative pen some 200-plus years ago, while writing in the midst of the French Revolution, which was transpiring less than 100 or so miles from where Blake was writing. A Poison Tree. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. A poison tree is a very basic message for maintaining loving relationships through communication. The key thought here is to communicate. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. Such a simple way to express a profound truth. When you feel something, and you have the common sense or the courage to express that feeling to your loved ones, the rage and the fury disappear almost as if by magic. My inclination has often been to stay silent about that which I feel angry. I admit to wanting to stew about it, play it over and over in my mind where I have extended dialogues with the person I feel angry toward. As long as I take this position of freezing out my loved ones or friends, the wrath persists. Yet when it finally does come out and we are able to communicate about it, expressing our authentic feelings, regardless of how absurd they may sound to the other person, magically and almost instantaneously, the fury subsides. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. This is precisely the lesson that I have had to learn, and I admit to still working on it today, each and every day in my life. In past relationships, ironically, I created foes out of those I loved the most. The moment that I made them a foe, I kept my wrath inside, playing intellectual games with myself and creating an unbelievably complex scenario that only I was privy to. Thus, the inclination to keep my wrath within, unexpressed, allowed me to create what Blake calls a poison tree. I would water it with my tears and sun it with deceitful smiles, and the result? it would continue to grow and bear fruit. And the fruit is definitely poison, so much so that it would eventually destroy those to whom I had given the tag of foe. There they were, outstretched beneath the tree. The message of this poem is profound. It applies not only in personal relationships, but in dealing with everyone in your life. Anytime you feel that spark go off inside of you, and your wrath begins to grow, you are headed for a potential morass. The way out of that potential morass is to stop and make that person a friend rather than a foe. Tell them, I feel that you are attempting to manipulate me right now, and I would prefer that it stop. This kind of honest, no-nonsense statement will put the wrath aside and inhibit the growth of a poison tree that will ultimately destroy you or whomever has become your foe. Similarly, in close family relationships, when you feel something like anger, practice mustering up the courage to say how you feel without being abusive or loud. I have found with my own children that when I give the silent treatment, the anger doesn't subside. In fact, it grows worse because each of us is growing our own poison tree inside because we've made foes of each other. When we sit down and I express how I am feeling and what my disappointments are, it generally leads to an open discussion in which we both express ourselves and ends with a hug and an I love you too, Dad. Amazingly, I told my wrath. My wrath did end. These are 8 words that you might want to memorize as you think about ways to make your relationships work at a blissful level more frequently. It is inevitable in any partnership for 2 people to have conflict. I often express my feelings that any relationship in which 2 people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary. Your soulmate is often the person who is most unlike you, the one who can push the buttons that send you into a frenzy. That person is your soulmate precisely because of this power. When you find yourself in a fury, the person who you perceive as causing it is your greatest teacher at that moment. They are teaching you that you have not yet mastered yourself, that you still do not know how to choose peace as that button is being pushed. The way to that peace is to tell your friend or your lover or your child or your parent or your mother-in-law exactly how you feel. Do this from a position of being detached and honest, and watch how your wrath disappears. You will have removed entirely the possibility of nurturing and producing a poison tree. To put the ideas of William Blake's famous poem into your own light, begin by following these simple suggestions. 1. When you find yourself in the midst of a freeze-out, either self-imposed or otherwise, break the silent treatment with a simple opener. Say something like, can we both agree to state how we are feeling right now without any judgment about it? 2. Use your opener to state directly how you feel by prefacing your statements with, I feel. Emphasize that at this moment, what you most need is a loving response to the way that you are feeling. Own your feeling and feel your feeling as you would with a friend who you can count on sharing your feelings with. At issue here is not the problem, but communicating your feelings. Then listen and hear the feelings of the other person with love and without defensiveness about the issue. Befriend the feelings. 3. Give yourself a self-imposed time limit for how long you will stay in a period of no talking. If you say 1 hour, then no matter how embarrassed or hurt you might feel, open the lines of communication. You will see that communicating rather than stifling yourself will end the rage almost immediately. And 4. Don't ever go to bed still holding on to your wrath. This will literally impact the field of energy that you both share and intensify the growth of a poison tree. Before going to sleep, simply state your feelings and make an effort to show a sign of affection, even if it means losing face and subduing your ego. The more you can create an atmosphere of open honesty, particularly regarding those areas of disagreement, the less likely those disagreements will turn into being disagreeable. It is in the time of being disagreeable that a seedling sprouts and eventually nourishes a poison tree. Henry David Thoreau was Harvard-educated, but chose the unpopular career of writer and poet to satisfy his soul's urge. A force in the New England Transcendentalists, along with Emerson, he loved nature, freedom, and individuality. Listen to this passage from Walden. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured and far away. The one comment that I am most pleased to hear from those who have read my books or listened to my tapes over the years goes like this. Your words finally reassured me that I am not insane. All my life people have been telling me there's something wrong with me for the way I think. Your words made me realize that I'm not crazy. I think that it was in reading Thoreau that I had the very same kind of epiphany. I have often imagined myself in the shoes of Thoreau, living simply and deliberately in the woods, being self-sufficient and writing down what I felt most deeply in my soul. But more than writing it down, the idea of living these ideas, regardless of how others perceived me or reacted, seemed somehow noble. Within each of us there is a voice that whispers, take the risks, pursue your dreams, live life to the fullest. As long as you're not hurting anyone else, why not? Then outside of us there are voices that scream, don't be a fool, you're going to fail. Be just like everyone else. If you do what you want, you're being selfish and you're hurting others. These loud, incessant dictates of our companions urge us to keep up with them and threaten to ostracize us when we fail to do so. I have observed that society in general always seems to honor its living conformists and its dead troublemakers. Everyone who has ever made a difference in any profession has listened to the music he or she hears and proceeded independent of the opinion of others. In doing so, they are labeled troublemakers, incorrigibles, even misfits. Yet they become highly respectable after death. This includes Henry David Thoreau, who was vilified for his position in his essay on the necessity of civil disobedience, and jailed for refusing to obey what he considered absurd rulings. Yet today he is required reading in virtually all high schools and universities. The beat that you hear within yourself is your connection to your soul's purpose. It will continue to plague you when you ignore it or suppress it in an attempt to conform with society. Those who implore you to march to the beat they hear are often well-intentioned and coming from a position of love for you. They'll tell you, I only have your very best interest in mind, and I am the voice of experience. You'll be sorry if you don't follow my advice. You listen and you try so hard to be just like everybody wants you to be. Yet that nagging drumbeat that no one else seems to hear faintly thumps in the farthest reaches of your awareness. If you continue to ignore it, you will live a life of frustration. You may even learn to suffer in comfort, which is the very best you'll be able to achieve. Thoreau is speaking directly to you from the mid-19th century about your own self-sufficiency and happiness. Whatever it is that you feel compelled to be or do is the voice of your soul pleading with you to have the courage to listen and act upon the melody only you hear, as long as it does not interfere with anyone else's right to pursue their dreams. And so it is with those around you who are also hearing a drumbeat that is foreign to you. They too must be allowed to step to the music they hear, even though it may sound strident and off-key to you. If everyone marched to the very same music and no one ever strayed from that conformity, we would all still be living in caves and preparing the same old recipe. Take one whole buffalo, skin it, burn it, and devour it. Progress is the result of individuals first listening to what their hearts tell them, and then acting on those messages despite the protestations of the tribe. Imagine yourself walking through the woods with Mr. Thoreau back in the 1840s before the Civil War. His observations were based not on some philosophy he had read or heard, but from his own direct experience of feeling the outrage of conformity and seeing the horrors of how Native Americans were being treated by the white man. He knew that to go along with the popular idea of removing Indians from their lands was our very own Holocaust. And so he left to live in nature and experience self-sufficiency away from the pressures of the larger group. He did not keep step with his companions, and at the time he was criticized for it. Yet time has revealed him to be one of those troublemakers we revere. Walk with Thoreau in your own mind. Listen to the voice you hear and the drumbeat only you can feel, and honor it, while honoring it in those you love as well. It is the ultimate act of unconditional love. While it may not get you any awards while you are alive, you can take comfort in knowing that you fulfilled your own divine purpose and encouraged others to do the same. To put Thoreau's advice into practice, first, refuse to evaluate yourself as sane or insane on the basis of how you fit in with the expectations of those around you. If you feel it and it harms no one, then it is authentic and very sane. Second, remind yourself that you will have to incur the misunderstanding and perhaps even the wrath of those in your immediate tribes for having the temerity to march to your own drumbeat. Don't take it personally, even for one moment. It is merely a strategy to get you to conform, and when you fail to react, the wrath will quickly disappear. Third, allow those in your immediate sphere, family and friends, to have the joy of blissfully marching to their own beat without having to explain or defend their choices. You will be substituting anger and resentment for peace and love, and everyone will enjoy the original music they hear. American poet, essayist, and philosopher known for challenging traditional thought, Emerson's philosophy is characterized by its reliance on intuition as the way to comprehend reality. Listen to this excerpt from Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. These are the voices which we hear in solitude, but they grow faint and inaudible as we enter into the world. Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. Society is a joint stock company in which the members agree, for the better securing of his bread, to each shareholder, to surrender the liberty and culture of the eater. The virtue in most request is conformity. Self-reliance is its aversion. It loves not realities and creators, but names and customs. Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. He who would gather immortal palms must not be hindered by the name of goodness, but must explore if it be goodness. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. The ideas of this one essay, Self-Reliance, have influenced all of my writing, and I consider Emerson to be one of my greatest teachers, even though he passed on well over a century ago. Ralph Waldo Emerson was known as much for his essays as his poetry. In perhaps his best-known and most frequently quoted essay titled Self-Reliance, this provocative American author, known as the father of the Transcendentalist movement, outlined in depth the basic tenets of what it means to be your own person. I can still remember the impact this essay, Self-Reliance, and its contemporary Henry David Thoreau's essay on the necessity of civil disobedience had on me when I was a 17-year-old high school student. In this brief excerpt, Emerson speaks to the necessity of being a nonconformist in order to be fully alive, and of the need to resist enculturation. Society demands conformity at the expense of individual liberty, he asserts, which is to say that it demands that you fit in or be an outcast. Emerson insists on the integrity of the individual mind, maintaining that it is essentially sacred. Now remember that Emerson was also a minister who is informing us that the mind is what is sacred, not the rules, not the laws, not the societal mores, but your mind. Further on in Self-Reliance, Emerson declares, "No law can be sacred to me but that of my nature." This profoundly courageous statement is from a fearless man who knew that divinity and sacredness are not in the institutions of the church but in the minds of individuals. Our conduct makes us divine creatures, not our memberships. How we use our minds as free-thinking people is what makes us sacred, not how well we cite the laws to protect our malice or vanity. When you stop to consider most of the evils that have been perpetrated on humanity, they have virtually all been accomplished under the protective custody of society's laws. Socrates was murdered because the law said it was proper to dispose of intellectual dissidents. St. Joan was burned at the stake because it was the law. All of the male babies in an entire country were systematically murdered because it was the rule. When my own mother was born, 1/2 of the population, that is 100% of the women, could not vote in America because the rules said so. At the time I was born, millions of people were being herded into death camps and all of their possessions confiscated because of inhumane laws. It was the law that required black people to sit in the rear of buses, drink at separate drinking fountains, and live lives of separate and inferior opportunity. So please don't cite the laws and rules of society to justify your actions. People who truly understand what is meant by self-reliance know they must live their lives by ethics rather than rules. It is possible to find some obscure law or rule or societal tradition to justify virtually anything. Those who do not give priority to the integrity of their own mind will indeed cite laws to explain why they do what they do. Aspiring to be a more sacred being means shedding your reliance on conformity. Emerson went on further in this provocative essay to say, "I am ashamed to think how easily we capitulate to badges and names, to large societies and dead institutions." He spoke openly of the long-held but immoral institution of slavery, which was protected by law. I ought to go upright and vital and speak the rude truth in all ways. If malice and vanity wear the coat of philanthropy, shall that pass? Recall, if you will, that Emerson was speaking and writing like this while slavery was legal and protected by society. What does this essay on self-reliance say to us today? It encourages us to cultivate ethics rather than rules or laws as the governing inner light for ourselves. If we know it is right, it will be in harmony with spiritual principles, many of which have been spoken about in this collection. For example, mercy. The law shows no mercy when it lawfully executes prisoners. When lawmakers, jurors, or the press say that the perpetrator showed no mercy, so why should the law? You must seek your own sense of what is right to formulate your own opinion. If mercy is an essential aspect of your spiritual practice, then citing someone else's lack of it is hardly a justification to ignore your own inner truth. This is self-reliance, not thinking like the herd or citing its rules as your rationale for your own inner truth. Emerson does not ask you to deliberately disobey any law, rather to use your own sense of ethics in running your life. He makes it clear, to be a man or a woman, you must be a nonconformist. I suggest that the best way to employ this profound truth from Emerson is to learn how to be quietly effective in your own life. That is, have no need to make public pronouncements about how you refuse to conform, and instead take solace in the comfort of your own inner strength, and proceed as a silent individual who knows how to rely on yourself. I practiced Emerson's philosophy starting with my discovery of his essay when I was 17. In 1959, I was 19 years old in the Navy, stationed aboard an aircraft carrier, the USS Ranger. President Eisenhower was scheduled to fly over our ship, and all of the sailors were required to get into full dress uniform and spell out "Hi Ike" on the flight deck as the president flew to a political meeting in San Francisco. When I learned that I was expected to participate, I was outraged at this insult, yet I seemed to be a small minority. Apparently, the majority of the crew did not mind conforming to create this greeting made of human letters. Rather than launching a protest, I recalled the words of Emerson. To be a man, I must be a nonconformist. But I had to do it silently. I let the conformists go about their task while I disappeared in the bowels of the ship until this insult to my self-reliance was completed. No outbursts, no useless fighting, simply being quietly effective. The rules are not reasons to live a certain way. It is the integrity of your own mind that you must first consult if you are ever to experience this quality of self-reliance. This lesson applies to all areas of your life, from making decisions for yourself about how you spend your free time, to how you will dress, to what you will eat, to how you will raise your children. Don't let the voices within you grow faint and inaudible in favor of that societal conspiracy. Be yourself, and run your life by what you know to be right and in harmony with your spiritual essence. That is, by the integrity of your own mind. American poet, translator, and college professor, Longfellow is considered to be both a popular and serious poet. Longfellow was one of the few poets included in this recording who enjoyed enormous popularity during his own lifetime. A Psalm of Life, first published in 1839 from a collection of poetry called Voices of the Night, became enormously popular in America and in Europe, as did his later even more famous works titled The Wreck of the Hespers and his classic The Song of Hiawatha. This poem, written by the man who holds the title as the most popular American poet of the 19th century, is a tribute to one word, and that word is enthusiasm. The original Greek meaning of this word is a God within. Here's Longfellow's A Psalm of Life. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant, let the dead past bury its dead, act in the living present, heart within, and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Longfellow's Psalm of Life encourages you and me to take a thoughtful look at the brief span of time given to us, which is our life, and to adopt an enthusiastic and grateful attitude for all that we are and all that we experience. In 1861, Longfellow was plunged into melancholy when his second wife died after accidentally setting fire to her dress. After losing 2 wives to untimely deaths, Longfellow longed for spiritual relief, and much of the poetry of his last 20 years reflected his quest for making connection with the divine. Yet this poem, A Psalm of Life, stands as a memorial to the spirit of this great and popular poet. In this poem, Longfellow tells us that the soul is our true essence, and things are not what they seem. Our bodies and our material surroundings are but a myth and a way of thinking that leads us to a dull and unfulfilled life. He reminds us that the grave is not our goal. When we speak of aging, we should refer only to the body, but the soul, the source of our God within, is not comprised of dust. He asks us to forget about our sorrows and our pleasures and instead turn our attention to our own growth and vow to be farther tomorrow than we are today. Our body is on a funeral march to the grave, but the God within will never know such a thing as a burial. I love his choice of words to get us out of the doldrums of a life in which we often act like dumb, driven cattle, doing whatever it is that our herd mentality directs us to do. Rather, he says, be a hero, which I interpret to mean, be enthusiastic until it positively thrills you. Demonstrate your enthusiasm for life and radiate it outward in everything that you do until it infects all those around you. This is heroism. You don't have to run into a burning building to save a child to be a hero. You just have to be in touch with that God within. Enthusiasm is not something granted to some and absent in others. All of us have a God within. Some of us choose to be in touch with it and display it, while others mask it and allow it to remain dormant. We let our inner God be dust, even though the poet reminds us, dust thou art, to dust returneth, was not spoken of the soul. Enthusiasm is a quality that nourishes success. When people ask me the secret of giving a great talk, I tell them it's being authentically enthusiastic. Be this, and you will be loved and forgiven for any flaws. Notice those people who have this heart for any fate and continue to achieve and pursue regardless of their circumstances. They love to laugh. They get excited over even the smallest of things. They don't seem to know how to be bored. Give them a gift, and they will hug you in appreciation and put it to use instantly. Give them a free ticket to a concert, and they bubble with delirium over the unexpected opportunity. Go shopping with them, and their eyes are open, appreciating everything in sight and never complaining. Don't you just love being around them? This is enthusiasm. It is the God inside all of us that wants us to know what Longfellow means when he says, life is real, life is earnest. Emily Dickinson was an American poet who spent her life in Amherst, Massachusetts. She wrote close to 2,000 poems during a reclusive life dominated by a stern Calvinist father. Like Whitman, Frost, and Emerson, she wrote about an inner spirit in nature and mankind. This poem is entitled The Single Hound, and it's one of my very favorites. This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies, and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing, and frocks and curls. This passive place, a summer's nimble mansion where bloom and bees fulfilled their oriental circuit, then ceased, like these. I've always been intrigued by this poem and quote it frequently in my lectures. I feel as if I'm personally delivering a message from one of my favorite 19th century poets. When you look around at your body and your world through this poem, you have to admit that everything you see, everything you experience with your senses, will someday be quiet dust. When you die, the instant after leaving your body, it will weigh precisely the same as when you were alive. Imagine that. Your body is the same weight, alive or dead. My conclusion here is that if the body weighs the same when life leaves as it did when it occupied it, then life is weightless. You cannot weigh, measure, compartmentalize, identify, or otherwise put boundaries on life. Emily Dickinson poetically describes this part of ourselves, the part that defies the dust bowl of the material world. Scientists explain this material world as a planet with a finite supply of minerals. By this they mean that the total supply of minerals is already here on the planet. There's no outside source of minerals. If you could determine exactly how much iron is here, for example, you would have a total count that you could identify as Earth's supply of iron. It is a finite amount, and when we use it all up, we cannot go to another universe to replenish our iron supply. Within your own body, you possess a specific fraction of our total finite supply of iron. When you have a blood test, you can know whether you are high or low on iron. Now for the million-dollar question. Where was the iron that now flows through your body before you showed up here on this planet? And where will it go when you make your departure? This is a part of the mystery that Emily Dickinson addresses in her poetic observation. In a sense, in this poem, Emily Dickinson is poetically saying the same thing as Aristotle did when he wrote, "Let us live as if we were immortal." They are both informing us that everything and everyone has a circuit to fulfill, and that when it is complete, it ceases in its current form and shifts to another. The material of our bodies is recycled, while our true essence remains. In another of her short poems, Emily Dickinson writes, "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves, and immortality." This awareness is a great source of liberation. It is your ticket to eternity. It allows you to stop fearing death. In many ways, the death of your body can be a great teacher rather than something to fear. American novelist, short story writer, poet, and war correspondent, probably best known for the Red Badge of Courage, Stephen Crane, who died at age 29, managed to produce work that assured him a permanent place in American literature. This selection from War is Kind is called "Do Not Weep, Maiden, for War is Kind." Do not weep, maiden, for war is kind. Because your lover threw wild hands toward the sky and the affrighted steed ran on alone, do not weep, war is kind. Hoarse, booming drums of the regiment, little souls who thirst for fight, these men were born to drill and die. The unexplained glory flies above them. Great is the battle god, great, and his kingdom a field where 1,000 corpses lie. Do not weep, babe, for war is kind. Because your father tumbled in the yellow trenches, raged at his breast, gulped and died, do not weep. War is kind. Swift blazing flag of the regiment, eagle with crest of red and gold, these men were born to drill and die. Point for them the virtue of slaughter. Make plain to them the excellence of killing, and a field where 1,000 corpses lie. Mother whose heart hung humble as a button on the bright splendid shroud of your son, do not weep. War is kind. The youngest of 14 children, Stephen Crane, lived a short but highly explosive life. He wrote about what simultaneously seemed to both attract and repel him. The violence of the streets and the victims it creates was the subject matter of his first novel, the story of Maggie, a girl of the streets. A sympathetic story of an innocent girl from the slums and her descent into prostitution and eventual suicide. In 1893, this topic was so taboo in literature that it was privately printed, and Crane had to use a pseudonym. This was followed in 1895 by his classic story of the horror of war, The Red Badge of Courage. He wrote of his aversion to violence, his sympathy for victims and the downtrodden, yet he was equally attracted to report and to experience firsthand these outrages, and once settled with a former brothel house proprietor. Stephen Crane's career as a writer and a journalist covering wars whenever they cropped up on the planet was brief. He died at 29 of malarial fever and tuberculosis, contracted while in Cuba covering the Spanish-American War. For me, this poem of deep irony is not only a disparaging attack on war and all of its horror, but it stands as a classic statement against violence of any kind. Also included is the violence that we observe daily of man's inhumanity to man and the rage and fury within our own hearts. These are equally as destructive and are also the subject of the poet's lament against war. His ironic poem, War is Kind, is a commentary on all of what he termed those little souls who thirst for fight, who find virtue in something so horrifying as slaughter, and excellence in a field of 1,000 corpses. For me, this is a lesson to look within myself for any remnant of a little soul who might find glory in the trumpeting of man's inhumanity to man. It is a reminder to allow my big soul to triumph over its lesser compatriot, and to suppress curiosity or fascination with violence of any kind. There are people who carry guns and leave maidens weeping all over the world, be it on battlefields or in our homes, schools, streets, and playgrounds. All seem to be men who were born to drill and die, yet we do not believe that anyone has such a destiny at birth. This carnage is the result of our own curiosity and fascination with warfare and killing, with violence and rage, so that we attract into our collective lives the very thing we fear the most. We live in a more subtle fashion the same kind of life as the poet Stephen Crane, attracting to ourselves that which repels us. Our fascination with violence and its ultimate implementation, killing, is reflected in our preoccupation with action films wherein human life is reduced in value so much so that the taking of these lives is considered to be entertainment. Killing for the sake of keeping the customers happy takes its toll on our collective consciousness, whether we recognize it or not. Yet there is much to weep about, and there is no shortage of tears. Maidens howl in anguish every hour of every day as loved ones fall victim to our almost insatiable attraction to war and unnecessary violence. We live in the most violent society on earth, where hundreds of thousands are killed and maimed yearly with barely a flicker of attention from our leaders chastising anyone on human rights. Recently, state officials from China were not to be granted full diplomatic recognition in an official visit because their country was being bitterly criticized for their stand on human rights. This seemed to me to be as ironic as Stephen Crane's poem, "Do Not Weep, Maiden, for War is Kind." To make a huge dent in this kind of fascination with war, killing, and violence, we must first look within our own hearts and allow the big soul to triumph over those inclinations. We must find the place within ourselves where we know that in some non-earth-based way we are all connected by an invisible organizing intelligence, and we need to live in this awareness. We must refuse to participate in any form of activity which purports to be entertainment, which trivializes violence and killing. We must teach our young sons that they were not born to drill and die, not born to throw their hands toward the sky in some kind of ego ritual to dying in battle as a badge of courage. We must raise them to have disdain for violence and to learn to check the impulses of fury brought on by an over-identification with ego's need to be triumphant in battle. We must teach them and ourselves the value of cooperation over competition, and to understand the great wisdom in the Native American homily, "No tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves." We must elect those who see the horror in having a world filled with weapons and live ammunition. They have to pursue at all costs with true courage the end of all weapons that are designed to kill, be it from megadeath nuclear bombs to low-caliber handguns. If they are meant to inflict death, we must find another way. And finally, we must look within our own hearts to quell our little soul's attraction to violence and instead find our fascination with kindness and love. All we need to do is be a little kinder toward each other. This was Aldous Huxley's answer when he was asked on his deathbed for his advice to mankind after a lifetime of study and exploration of the human spirit. Simple words with a simple solution. War is most assuredly not kind. Being kind is the solution, not only in the world as a collective whole, but in our individual lives where it all begins. To put this awareness of Stephen Crane's poem to work in your own life, begin to 1. Eliminate your personal participation in movie-going, television watching, or reading which promotes violence or reduces the value of human life by making killing and maltreatment any form of entertainment. 2. Teach young people to value kindness over killing. Talk to them about why you don't want them using play guns and weapons. Explain that they can change the world by choosing kindness over killing as a way to play. 3. Catch yourself when you feel violent impulses and have a quiet self-talk which allows you to reprogram yourself along the lines of kindness rather than rage. By recognizing rage when it crops up, you will allow the big soul to begin to tame the more base tendencies of the little soul. And 4. Support organizations which have as their mission the eradication of violence on our planet. There are many organizations from the UN to local groups who want to elect more kindness-oriented people to commissions and as government representatives. Choose at least one to give your support to. William James once wrote, "There is a law in psychology that if you form a picture in your mind of what you would like to be, and you keep and hold that picture there long enough, you will soon become exactly as you have been thinking." William James, an American philosopher, psychologist, and teacher, was a gifted writer in the fields of theology, psychology, ethics, and metaphysics. He was part of an incredibly accomplished family. His father, Henry James Sr., was a highly respected philosophical theologian who wrote his own philosophy based on the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg. His brother Henry, 1 year younger, became a world-class novelist who wrote Daisy Miller, The Portrait of a Lady, and The Ambassadors. William is considered by many to be the father of modern psychology. In this one brief statement, he offers a powerful tool for all of us to use each and every day of our lives. It is glorious in its simplicity, and when fully understood, it is also one of the great secrets of becoming exactly the kind of person you would like to be. Yet because of its simplicity, it is often ignored by those who attribute their unhappiness to factors such as luck, or the gods, or circumstances, or the economy, or genetics, or family history, or a potentially endless litany of excuses explaining their failures and flaws. William was much sought after as a lecturer in the fields of religion, philosophy, and psychology, which he personally transformed from a non-scientific philosophy to a laboratory science. He abandoned the philosophy of determinism, proclaiming, "My first act of free will shall be to believe in free will." He refers to the statement at the beginning of this piece as a law in psychology. This process of forming a picture in our mind is often referred to as visualization, and is based on the biblical idea, "As ye think, so shall ye be." This goes well beyond the idea of positive thinking. If you want to see your life work at an entirely new level, I encourage you to discover how this law works for you personally. We think in pictures, just as we dream in pictures. Not words, sentences, or phrases, but mental images. The words are symbols enabling us to communicate or describe those pictures. It is this picturing process that William James is saying that you control with your free will. If you can learn to hold those pictures long enough without allowing anyone to weaken them, you will actually convert those pictures into your reality. You will become a co-creator of your very existence and all that shows up in your life. I have written an entire book and produced a recording based on the principles involved in this process called Manifest Your Destiny, and I choose not to repeat those 9 principles here. What I will do is offer you what I think of as the 4 R's for putting this idea to work beginning today. Here are the 4 R's in one sentence. What you really, 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 really want, you will get. The first R stands for what you really wish. Here is where you form a picture of what you would like in your life, such as a promotion, a new car, weight loss, non-addiction, or whatever. Once the picture is formed, you wish for it by seeing yourself in the job or driving the new car or at your desired weight or non-addicted. Everything you manifest begins with a wish based upon an inner visualization. The second R stands for what you really desire. The difference between merely having a picture in your mind that you wish for and a desire is in your willingness to ask for it. Ask and you shall receive is not an empty promise. Whatever it is that you have wished for in your imagery, ask out loud but privately to receive. God, I am asking for your cooperation in bringing this picture to me in a material way. The third R stands for what you really intend. Now you take the picture which you have wished for and asked for, and you frame it into a statement of intention or will. It goes like this. I intend to bring this picture into my world with the cooperation of whatever you prefer to name as the creative intelligence. There's no room here for doubt with such statements as, if everything works out okay, or if I am lucky. A statement of intention is based on the law that William James stated for you at the beginning of this passage. The fourth R stands for what you feel really passionate about, or what I call the hardening of the will. You are unwilling to allow anyone to discourage your passionate purpose or put a damper on your picture. You resist the negative opinion of others, and you remain silent as much as possible on what it is that you intend to produce into your life. This passion is what William James meant by, and you keep and hold that picture there long enough. Those who are really, 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 really accomplished at attracting into their lives all that they desire are by no means lucky, nor do their circumstances create their desires. They have all 4 R's working for them at all times, and particularly the fourth R, which is really passionate. Virtually everything in my life, including all of my books and tapes, are the result of applying this law in psychology. It all begins with a wish. This recording, along with the book, began with a wish that I could write a book and produce a recording that interpreted the great wisdom of the people I've so admired all of my life and what they offer all of us today, even though they've all left our planet. I actually saw a picture of the various poems and contributions at the top of 60 pages in my essay to you, the reader. I then expressed this desire to my wife and my agent along with my editor at the same time as I asked for the ability and the cooperation of the universe in bringing it all about. This was followed by an intention to create such a book and record it, which I relayed to the various people and departments involved in the publishing process. Some liked it, some were a bit skeptical, telling me all the reasons why poetry analysis were not popular, and some discouraged me. I had my picture of the book, and I loved the idea of bringing these great masters to my readers and to those who listen to my tapes. Finally, my passion took over, and it was impossible for me to ignore my picture. As William James said, you will soon become exactly as you have been thinking. And here it is. You're listening to it right now. The key to this is putting all 4 R's to work and really using them. What is it that you weren't willing to do to make it happen, is my response to the question I frequently hear as to why something didn't materialize as pictured. When the passion is there, and you refuse to allow any interference from any external source, there is nothing that will stop you. According to William James, it's the law. To activate this law in your life, I suggest you implement the 4 R's. Here are a few suggestions. First, be willing to wish for anything that you want. You are entitled to share in the abundance of the universe. Refuse to limit yourself or see yourself as unworthy. You are a divine creation of God and are as much entitled to prosperity, love, and health as anyone who has ever lived on this planet. 2. Express your wishes in the form of a request to whatever you call that creative intelligence which many call God. Be willing to ask for help, and don't be embarrassed to put your request in writing as well as voicing it. Ask and you shall receive is not an empty promise. 3. Practice phrasing your requests in terms that eliminate doubt. Use words such as I will, I shall, I intend, rather than camouflaging your desires in the wishy-washy terminology of language which seeks but doesn't expect to receive. And 4, as much as possible, keep your pictures to yourself along with your intentions to materialize them. When you encounter resistance, instead of using it to become discouraged, transform the negative feedback into the energy of your passion to bring your picture into clear and touchable focus. A theatrical personality attracted to spiritualism, theosophy, and mysticism, Wisconsin-born Ella Wheeler Wilcox was much loved by the readers of her syndicated column of prose and poetry and the volumes of poetry which she wrote. This is one of her poems entitled Solitude. Laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone. For the sad old earth must borrow its mirth, but has trouble enough of its own. Sing, and the hills will answer. Sigh, it is lost on the air. The echoes bound to a joyful sound, but shrink from voicing care. Rejoice, and men will seek you. Grieve, and they turn and go. They want full measure of all your pleasure, but they do not need your woe. Be glad, and your friends are many. Be sad, and you lose them all. There are none to decline your nectared wine, but alone you must drink life's gall. Feast, and your halls are crowded. Fast, and the world goes by. Succeed and give, and it helps you live, but no man can help you die. There is room in the halls of pleasure for a long and lordly train, but one by one we must all file on through the narrow aisles of pain. The title of this famous poem is called Solitude. I think a far more fitting title would be Attitude. What Ella Wilcox is saying to us via this oft-quoted poem is that whatever attitude you decide to adopt is precisely what you will attract into your own life. Think sad and you attract emptiness. Think mirth and the world will laugh right along with you. This beautifully simple poem is also a very elementary presentation of energy field theory, written before fields of energy were contemplated. Essentially, energy field theory says that there is an invisible vibratory field of energy surrounding all living objects, including human beings. This field is created by how we think and process our experiences wherever we are in the world. At certain levels of consciousness, the energy field vibrates fast. At other levels of consciousness, the energy vibrates slowly. Essentially, there is a continuum along which varying levels of consciousness are responsible for creating the field of energy. We encounter different energy fields when we are within each other's physical proximity. Where there is strong, continuous energy for extended periods of time, even when people are gone, the field of energy can remain intense. For instance, we often feel sad or happy without realizing that we have entered a field of energy that is invisibly present. While touring the home of Anne Frank in Amsterdam, I almost had to force myself to breathe. The air seemed so heavy throughout this house, which was now a museum where millions of people have come to share the story of Anne Frank. The joyous energy field also remains in places where it predominates. In the presence of highly advanced spiritual people, one can feel love and be transformed in consciousness just by being in their field of energy. Ella Wheeler Wilcox unknowingly captured the essence of field energy theory with these two famous lines: "Laugh and the world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone." Many years ago, I had an experience while walking on the beach which illustrates the message in this popular poem. A woman approached me who was moving to Florida from Chicago. She recognized me from a television appearance the night before. She said, "Do you live here in South Florida?" And I responded that I did and was taking a beach walk after returning from an all-night flight. Then she asked me a commonly heard question: "What are the people like here?" I responded with a question of my own: "What are the people like in Chicago?" She smiled broadly and told me how warm and friendly people were in the Midwest, and I told her immediately, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." On my return walk along the same beach, a woman whose husband was being transferred to Miami from New York stopped me to say that she had seen me on television the night before and how much she enjoyed the show. We struck up a conversation, and then she asked me the same question I had heard only an hour before on the very same beach. Naturally, I asked her the same question in return: "What are the people like in New York?" She launched into a tirade on how insensitive, cliquey, and unfriendly it was in the big city, and I responded, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." We attract into our lives pretty much what we ourselves project with our own attitude. In general, those who feel that the world is a cesspool notice the vermin, while those who believe in the goodness of humanity see others of like mind. Many people lament the poor quality of service in contemporary America. "You just can't get good service" is a gripe you hear daily. In fact, Time magazine did a cover story on the decline of service in every field, from retail stores and restaurants to getting your watch repaired. Recently, on a television show where everyone on the panel unanimously agreed on the poor quality of service, I disagreed. I explained that I felt expectation attracted what it expected. When I enter any retail store or restaurant, I expect to be treated cheerfully and politely, and that's pretty much what I get. If I can't find a salesperson to wait on me, I refuse to contaminate my energy field with thoughts of displeasure and disgust. Instead, I begin sending out the energy that I want to find. If I encounter a surly waiter, I immediately bring him into my field of energy with, "Looks like it's been a tough day. I understand. And you've just been rewarded with a customer who appreciates you and how tough your job is. Take your time." Lo and behold, the poet is right. Be glad and your friends are many. Be sad and you'll lose them all. Your field of energy radiates at whatever vibratory frequency you generate. You are impacting and being impacted by the energy fields of many people each and every day. Refuse to give energy to things you don't want or don't believe in is a very powerful piece of advice. Anytime you opt for weeping rather than laughing, sighing rather than singing, grieving instead of rejoicing, sadness over gladness, fasting in favor of feasting, or pain in favor of pleasure, you are making a choice to slow down your vibrations and to pollute your immediate mental energy field. Every morning as you take in your first view of day, you have the choice to say, "Good morning, God," or "Good God, morning." Whichever you choose is precisely the energy that you will invite into your life. Indeed, there is room in the halls of pleasure for a long and lordly train. Remember Ella Wheeler Wilcox's poem while you increase the vibration of your energy field with these adjustments to your attitude. Born in India of English parents, Rudyard Kipling was a successful novelist and poet and short story writer whose popularity in America was second only to Mark Twain during the 5 years he lived in Vermont while publishing the Jungle Books and Captains Courageous. This oft-quoted poem by Rudyard Kipling has long been a great favorite of mine. When I read it, I picture myself with any one of my 8 children on my lap while I impart the wisdom of the ages to his or her open and eager mind. In this fantasy, my child listens intently while I describe the secrets of the universe as though I am the enlightened master who has discovered them through a lifetime of struggle, and now, with fatherly wisdom, pass them on to the next generation, who will use this knowledge to transform their world. End of fantasy. Listen to this poem. It's called If. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, does indeed inspire such a vision whenever I hear it, but it is purely a fantasy of mine. I have discovered truth in many of the tidbits of advice Kipling offered to his son in this poem, but frankly I still work on applying this kind of advice in my own life every day. This famous poem by Rudyard Kipling, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1907, has so much to offer every one of us. The lofty ideas in this 4-stanza poem inspire me to be a better man each time I read it and share it with my children or students or audiences. I have included If in this collection because of my desire to share it also with you. That is, I want you to feel inspired to not only be able to help others to improve their own quality of life, but to also feel inspired to become a better person yourself. There are so many messages in these 32 lines of poetry. Let me tell you what inspires me in this poetic advice. I am inspired by the idea of being self-directed enough to maintain my own sense of balance and integrity when I do not allow myself to become part of the madness around me, irrespective of what others might think. Be yourself is the advice, not only here, but in many of the selections in this recording. And when I am able to do so without judging those around me, I feel heartened. I want my children and any others who may decide to make me their teacher to cultivate their personal integrity and balance in the face of any and all circumstances. I am inspired when I am a good loser in life. I've not always been this way, and I'm not always that way now, but I am much better at it today. I love the action and competition as much as ever, and I can now retreat in peace when the contest is over and know in my heart that the real me is unattached to outcomes. The act of participating means that you will win some and lose some, and the results are imposters posing as the real you. I would like my children to know that they are not their victories, nor are they their defeats. I am inspired when I can make my decisions in life based on how I feel rather than how things will turn out. Those are the times when I can turn down a lucrative offer to host a television show in favor of speaking at a benefit and not only not worry about it, but not feel the need to mention it to anyone, and when I can be generous anonymously. I am inspired when I see myself living from my heart and needing less and less to prove myself worthy. I am inspired when I can read poetry all day and then write about that rather than taking on a more financially rewarding activity. I am inspired when I notice that I no longer am compulsively attached to convincing others that I am right, even if I know the truth of what I am saying to be exactly right for me. I want my children and my students to know the joy and fulfillment of following their own destinies and pursuing their own heroic missions, even if those around them, including me, would prefer another course. All of these qualities that Kipling so brilliantly portrays in his poem If signify to me what he truly means in his conclusion. If you can do all these, you too will feel inspired, and yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. This was his way of saying to his son that maturity is being your own person without judgment toward others. When you are grown up in these ways, you will have everything you could ever want. Known as Mahatma, which means great soul, Gandhi advocated nonviolence in his fight for independence and civil rights for the people of India. Both the secret for manifesting what you desire into your life and the mysteries of quantum physics are partially revealed in these brief words of Mohandas Gandhi. He says, "Strength of numbers is the delight of the timid. The valiant in spirit glory in fighting alone." This is clearer when we consider that we can divide the universe of our personal experience into the seen and the unseen, or the material and the spiritual. The world of the seen is what we experience with our senses. It is this world that we are most interested in when it comes to having the things we desire. But where do things come from? How does this so-called reality manifest? Quantum physicists search for the answer to that question, and I contend that the first quantum physicist was not Niels Bohr or Einstein, but the author of most of the New Testament, St. Paul. In the words of St. Paul, "That which is seen hath not come from that which doth appear." It seems to me that St. Paul stated precisely what contemporary quantum physicists have concluded. Particles themselves are not responsible for their own creation. Quantum mechanics involves studying matter, the material world, at the tiniest level, while looking for the source of our physical world. The conclusion is that the world of the seen comes from the world of the unseen. So how does all of this relate to Gandhi's viewpoint of the valiant in spirit fighting alone? Listen on. The two divisions of our one reality are ego and spirit. Ego is often described as standing for earth guide only, because one cannot create or manifest from the dimension of ego, and the unseen world is called spirit. Particles, the material itself, are not responsible for their own creation. To manifest your dreams, you must be free from your ego. Ego is nothing more than an idea you carry around that insists you are separate and in competition with others, and also separate from God or your source. As long as you believe yourself to be separate from everyone and from your source, you lose the power of your source. When you reconnect to your source, or make conscious contact with the unseen spirit, you regain the power of your source. This means you regain the power to manifest, to heal, and to attract what you desire into your life. However, even reconnected to source, ego wants to be involved. The moment that you begin to tell others about what you desire and how you're going to create the kind of life you know is your personal destiny, you invite ego. As you begin explaining your radical ideas, you will be asked to defend yourself. Then you will feel the need to argue about how this fits or fails to fit into the perception of those you are talking to. And most debilitating of all, you will be expected to listen to the logic of those you choose to share your dreams with as they tell you to get real and look around at the circumstances of your life. Once the ego becomes involved, you literally lose the ability to create what your heart tells you is your destiny. Thus, by sharing your innermost desire, you seek out the strength of numbers, which Gandhi says is the delight of the timid. Make no mistake about it. The timid do not manifest their own dreams. They join the ranks of the unfulfilled. By fighting alone for what you know to be your destiny, regardless of what others say, you become the valiant in spirit who glory in fighting alone. Spirit is the source of all that you see, all that you witness, all that you observe. You can reconnect by avoiding ego's influence. This means specifically keeping your dreams to yourself and sharing them only with God, or whatever you call that invisible source of everything in our material world. Reconnect to that source and regain all of the powers of that source. Invite the ego and you ensure separation from your source. As a young man, I had a vision of creating financial independence. I shared my plan with family and friends. Each time I related how I was going to first pay myself 1/5 of everything I earned before anything was spent elsewhere, I heard all sorts of objections to my financial strategy. I remember being told, "You're out of touch with reality. You can't save 20% of your income, pay taxes, pay your bills, and take care of your family. It's impossible." I defended my plan, explaining how compounding the interest and not touching the principal would lead to living off of the tax-free interest in less than 15 years. But I would become discouraged listening to the experts, in quotes, who were majoring in poverty. I learned to keep my mouth shut and proceed silently. I found that the less I needed to tell others of my vision, the faster my vision began materializing. By removing my dream from the ego state and instead relying on the silent power, I attracted into my life a financial independence that reflected my inner vision. Gandhi's words remind me of that earlier time of my life, and they are a succinctly powerful reminder in today's world. Resist the need to have many people endorse your dreams, and instead be a valiant spirit who glories in trusting your inner guidance. Another way of saying this is less sophisticated, but equally as profound. If you follow the pack, you're going to end up stepping in a lot of what they leave behind. American poet Langston Hughes also wrote humorous newspaper sketches, a novel, and a short story collection. He is most widely known for his poems, which use the rhythms of the blues and the ballad, are often documentary, and deal with the trials and joys of the African American. This brief poem, written in a quick, witty style by the man I consider to be the forefather to the American civil rights movement, is a tribute to the healing effect of forgiveness, as well as a parody on the absurdity of labeling people on the basis of physical appearances, particularly the color of one's skin. It's entitled Cross. My old man's a white old man, and my old mother's black. If ever I cursed my white old man, I take my curses back. If ever I cursed my black old mother and wish she were in hell, I'm sorry for that evil wish, and now I wish her well. My old man died in a fine big house. My ma died in a shack. I wonder where I'm going to die, being neither white or black. The final line in each of the first two stanzas sends a powerful message to all of us. They sum up what true spirituality as well as socio-mental health truly is. I take my curses back, and now I wish her well. What is Langston Hughes saying to us through these lines? I believe he is expressing that he is spiritually mature enough to say to his parents, I forgive you, and I'm sorry for any evil thoughts I've ever directed your way. The freedom in a simple act of forgiveness saves the expense of anger and the high cost of hatred. Forgiveness can buy peace of mind. Think of everything that has ever been directed at you for which you bear grudges or hostility. Every hurt or sting is like being bit by a snake. You rarely die from the injury, but once bitten, it is impossible to be unbitten, and the damage is done by the venom that continues to flow through your system. The venom is your bitterness and hatred that you hang on to long after you've been hurt. It is this venom that will ultimately destroy your peace of mind. The antidote is forgiveness, which is not as difficult as you may want to believe. If you believe that forgiveness is a challenging and conflict-ridden act that you have to struggle with for a lifetime, I suggest quite the opposite is true. Forgiveness is joyful, easy, and most of all, exceedingly freeing. It relieves us of the burdens of resentment and past grievances, and is just another word for simply letting go. I speak here from my own personal experience, and it is perhaps why I am so attracted to this poem. My old man was a white old man who walked out of my life when I was an infant and never even bothered to make a phone call. Not once in his lifetime did he ever call to see how his 3 boys were faring. He spent some time in prison, drank excessively, was abusive to my mother and many other women, and died of cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 49 and was buried in a pauper's grave in Biloxi, Mississippi. I carried the burden of resentment and hatred until I was in my early 30s, when I went to his grave and said essentially the same thing that Langston Hughes said. I take my curses back. And in doing so, I literally transformed my own life. My writing began to click, my approach to my health improved significantly, my relationships shifted away from hostility and toward spiritual partnership, and most of all, I felt free from the burden of having that venom pumping through my veins. When we learn to pardon, we rise above those who have insulted or aggrieved us, and this act of forgiveness puts an end to the quarrel. The last stanza of Langston Hughes' poem speaks to the labeling process of identifying ourselves by our outward appearances. Søren Kierkegaard, the famed Danish theologian, remarked, "Once you label me, you negate me." The process of putting ourselves and others into neat little compartments on the basis of any label, and then making judgments about everyone on the basis of those labels, is as non-spiritual and dehumanizing an experience as I can imagine. Yet it is done all the time. Our governments ask us to fill out census reports and to neatly compartmentalize ourselves racially. Funding is allotted on the basis of these distinctions, and prejudices are rampant because we tend to identify each other on the basis of what we can see with our eyes rather than feel with our hearts. We know that we can exchange our inner organs and borrow each other's blood, and we know that our thoughts and our souls are colorless, yet we still need to put labels on ourselves on the basis of what is outside. We have a close friend who lives on Maui. His father is black and has long been separated from the family, and his mother is white. Like Langston Hughes, he has been raised by his mother and his grandmother. He once casually remarked to me that, being neither white or black, I really have no one to hate. There is much to learn from this observation. I love Langston Hughes' final two lines. They sum up the absurdity of ever putting any label of any kind on any person. I wonder where I'm going to die, being neither white or black. Such a dilemma. We know what to do with his old man and his old mother, but how do we deal with this? This man, Langston Hughes, wrote his poetry in the 1920s and 30s when racial hatreds and tensions were at an all-time high in America. And he spoke from his heart with great courage. Perhaps his most famous poem is I Too Sing America. I reproduce it here for you to listen to as you consider these twin themes of forgiveness and labeling. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll sit at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I, too, am America. He reminds us from a generation or two back that we act shamefully when we apply labels to anyone. And he was correct. Tomorrow nobody will dare say, eat in the kitchen. And it is so because a man like Langston Hughes was able to laugh and grow strong and feel beautiful, despite what anyone might say to the contrary. And yes, to be able to forgive. He reminds us that everyone is of equal value, as did William Blake, who also wrote of his disdain for prejudice and left his poetic reminder. In heaven, the only art of living is forgetting and forgiving. To put these ideas of Langston Hughes to work now in your own life, begin first to take stock of everyone who has ever wronged you in any way, regardless of how severe or recent it may have been, and make the choice to let go. Forgiveness is an act of the heart. Do it for yourself, to provide the antidote for the poison that you have allowed to circulate inside of you. And second, be aware that your parents and everyone else in your past did what they knew how to do, given the conditions of their lives. You can't ask any more of anyone. Perhaps you would not have done it that way, so learn from it. Forgiving is recognizing that deep injuries will not recover until you forgive. So make that choice, and you will immediately feel freer than you've ever felt. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister and a passionate fighter for civil rights through nonviolent action. Here's one of Dr. King's most famous quotes. The nonviolent approach does not immediately change the heart of the oppressor. It first does something to the hearts and souls of those committed to it. It gives them a new self-respect. It calls up resources of strength and courage that they did not know they had. Finally, it reaches the opponent, and so stirs his conscience that reconciliation becomes a reality. This reminds me of a story about the Buddha. It seems that a man had heard of the reputation that Buddha had for being peaceful and nonviolent regardless of what he encountered in life. This man decided to test the Divine One, and he traveled a long distance to be in his presence. For 3 days he was rude and obnoxious to the Buddha. He criticized and found fault with everything the Buddha said or did. He verbally abused the Buddha, attempting to get him to react angrily. Yet the Buddha never faltered. Each time he responded with love and kindness. Finally, the man could take it no longer. "How could you be so peaceful and kind when all I've ever said to you was antagonistic?" he asked. The Buddha's response was in the form of a question to the man. "If someone offers you a gift, and you do not accept that gift, to whom does the gift belong?" the Buddha replied. The man had his answer. If someone offers you a gift of their anger or hostility, and you do not accept it, then it still belongs to the giver. Why choose to be upset or angry over something that does not belong to you? This is the essence of the message that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. offers us. When you choose the nonviolent approach, your first impact will be on yourself. You become less inclined to accept the gifts of ill will that come your way. You will simply, quote, pass when others try to seduce you into arguments or conflict of any kind. Your initial objective will not be to change anyone, but rather to deliberately and lovingly work on being an instrument of grace and indulgence. The more peaceful you become within yourself, the less you will be affected by the enmity or the disaffection of others. When Dr. King speaks of something happening to the heart and soul of those who are committed to nonviolence, he is not speaking exclusively of the civil rights movements or class warfare. He is telling us that if we can commit ourselves to a peaceful heart, we will behave more courageously and with a strength that we have never known before. As those around us attempt to draw us into their battles, our commitment to being peaceful allows us to have a different dialogue with ourselves before we even consider accepting of the gifts being offered. Our affirmation is, "I will choose peace rather than this." After a series of these dialogues, we react peacefully automatically. My wife Marceline is a very peaceful, meditative woman, and always has been in the 2+ decades that we've been together. In our earliest years, I would attempt to draw her into arguments with my rather loud logic, but she simply didn't play the relationship game that way. Essentially, she was telling me with her behavior, "I am not interested in fighting with you," and she displayed this by showing me a peaceful countenance and not joining in my attempts to argue. Before long, I realized that I was not going to bulldoze this woman into thinking my way. I realized that it is very difficult to pick a fight with someone who has no interest in fighting. She wasn't trying to change me with her behavior. She was responding peacefully from her commitment to nonviolent behavior. As you listen to these beautiful words of Dr. King, remind yourself that your objective in choosing to be a nonviolent person is not to change anyone or to fix the world. Your objective is to give yourself the self-respect that you deserve as a divine creation of God, and to remove the pain associated with conflict and dis-ease. You will then begin to effortlessly radiate that strength of self-respect and peace, and impact those around you simply by your presence. A nun who was a history and geography teacher and headmaster in Calcutta, Mother Teresa was called to leave the convent to help the poorest of the poor and live with them. In 1950, she and her helpers established the Missionaries of Charity. She had this wisdom to share with all of us. There should be less talk. A preaching point is not a meeting point. What do you do then? Take a broom and clean someone's house. That says enough. The most effective way to teach anyone what we would like them to know is through behavior, not words. Often, endless hours are spent in conversation expressing our frustration about what it is that we find objectionable, and verbally exchanging insults and examples of what is so exasperating. The desired change does not materialize, and you still experience the anguish of being mistreated. Mother Teresa, the diminutive spiritual giant who worked daily in the streets of Calcutta seeing Jesus Christ in all of his distressing disguises, as she put it, offers us some great wisdom in her briefly spoken advice. There should be less talk. There should be more action on your part. Words that are not backed by action become simply a preaching point and nothing more. If you want to make a point, you may need to create a meeting point with new and effective behavior. The old aphorism, I hear, I forget. I see, I remember. I do, I understand, applies not only to what you want to learn, but also to how you wish to be treated. Obviously, you cannot learn how to swim by simply listening to the words of others or watching other people in the water. You must do it in order to know it. And the same concise logic applies to the folly of endlessly exchanging words as your only means of communication. Behavior is the most effective way to communicate with others in your life. My wife and I have always told our children about kindness to all creatures, yet the most effective way of communicating this message comes with our own behavior. Perhaps the most telling example of this occurred on Maui when Marceline and one of our daughters discovered a tiny bird who had fallen from its nest. I recall my wife, who had many important family matters to attend to that day, taking that tiny bird in a shoebox and driving halfway around the island to a shelter which she had called, spending 4 hours in traffic and giving up her day for a little baby bird. She delivered the tiny creature to helping hands, and in so doing, she created a meeting point rather than a preaching point. All of our children, including myself, saw love for all creatures in action that day, and the lesson had more impact than any tirade on the subject. Mother Teresa was not a person you could call cruel or uncaring. Her life was devoted to charity and helping the less fortunate among us to have humane treatment. She seemed to know that the way to make this a reality was not to tell others about the importance of virtuous action, but to actually live it. It is not cruel to show with behavior that you will not condone those things you find objectionable. It may be the only way to effect change. Your words, while important, risk being forgotten if they are not followed by action. People of action, those who make a difference in life, those whom we most admire, all seem to know the truth of the ancient wisdom. What you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you say. Be a doer, and in the process, you will do more to teach others and to bring fulfillment into your life than all the words in the dictionary could ever convey. This program is not about appreciating poetry and philosophy as much as it is about applying the wisdom of these writers to our everyday life. All of the selections in this recording convey messages from sensitive, highly creative, and productive individuals who were alive here on planet Earth at one time, just as you and I are today. I feel a bit presumptuous including a selection of my very own in this assemblage of splendor from so many supreme poets, artists, and philosophers of the past, but I have chosen to because I want you to know the story behind the poetic effort from someone who is still here to share his reasons for writing it. So I conclude this recording with a poem I wrote for my wife, Marceline, and hope that you too will take pen in hand and toss aside fear of embarrassment, ridicule, or unfair comparisons to the great poets, and give your innermost feelings a chance to be expressed to those you love. This selection is titled Brisbane, because that is the city in northern Australia back in 1989, where I felt and knew absolutely, beyond any doubt, that there was a force at work in the universe called by me God. It was my introduction to knowing God, whereas up until that day I had only known about God. Brisbane, where God was revealed to us. Only the two of us know the magic and awe of that presence. Against impossible odds, our connection to eternity further reinforced, strengthened. Yet the paradox always lingers. We are in control, we are not in control, doomed to make choices. All I am certain of is our love, embedded in forever. My wife Marceline and two of our children, who were 1.5 and 3.5 at the time, were with me on a speaking tour of Australia in the winter of 1989. I spoke to a large gathering of people during the day, and we returned exhausted to our hotel in Brisbane and retired for the evening. I had one of the children in my bed while Marceline slept and nursed the baby in the adjoining bed. At 4:05 a.m., something that had never happened before or since occurred to startle me beyond anything I could describe here. My wife awakened from a deep sleep and began to rearrange the room. She took our 3.5-year-old out of my bed and put her with our little 1.5-year-old boy. She proceeded to get into my bed and to snuggle up next to me. This was uncharacteristic of Marceline, particularly because she was nursing our son full-time. I was in a semi-conscious state of shock, thinking I was having a dream. My wife had been either nursing or pregnant for the previous 8 years and consequently had completely halted her menstrual cycle. Furthermore, she had been assured that she could not get pregnant again because of a surgical procedure in which one ovary had been removed. But to be certain, we practiced birth control, and I withdrew at the critical moment to put an exclamation point on our precaution. Yet, despite all of this, at 4:05 a.m. in Brisbane, Australia, our youngest daughter, Sage Icus Irene Dyer, was conceived and brought into our world on 16 November 1989. What awoke my wife at that instant? What caused this strange behavior by a woman who was always in control to appear to be almost obsessed? What force was operating that night? Who was in charge here? Sage has been a uniting force of love in our marriage, yet when I discovered that my wife was pregnant from that wonderfully bizarre middle-of-the-night obsession, I knew, as did Marceline, that there were forces working to bring that little angel into the material world through us that went way beyond our decision to not have any more children. Surgery, birth control, withdrawal, an absence of a female cycle with which to keep track of ovulation, and being sound asleep in a foreign land are all insignificant minor obstacles to a life force that strives to manifest into our material world. On Mother's Day, 1989, I wrote the Brisbane poem for my wife and put it in a framed collage of our Australia trip. But no matter how many words I write and how desperately I attempt to convey the specialness of that experience as I wrote, only the two of us know the magic and awe of that presence. From that time until now, I have never experienced one moment of doubt about the presence of God in my life. I do not engage in long arguments with disbelievers, nor do I feel any particular need to convince anyone of what I know. I simply express it in my writing and my lectures, and yes, in my own little poetic expression written to and for my wife, I go back to that moment, and my connection to that divine, awakening, all-pervasive, omnipresent force is reinforced and strengthened. I also know through this experience that every soul which manifests into a human being is also a part of this divine drama. We like to think that we are the ones in charge of such matters, yet a big part of me knows that nothing can stop a determined soul, and the paradox of the statement, doomed to make choices, is evident at all times. That is, we are in control, and we are not in control, all at the same time, and learning to live with this enigma is a big part of what knowing God is all about. You arrived here through a similar miraculous scenario. Your heart started beating inside of your mother's womb a few weeks after conception, and it's a total mystery to everyone on our planet. How does something come from no thing? Where was that life before conception? What happens in the instant of creation? We are all walking, breathing, talking paradoxes, and perhaps we do best to let go of the intellectual struggle and accept with a loving heart, while being certain of our love embedded in forever. By all means, hang on to the awe and appreciate every moment of life and every molecule of creation. But somewhere, deep down inside of you, in a tiny corner of your awareness, know for certain that there is one divine presence at work in you and in the entire universe as well, and that it never makes a mistake, despite what you may have come to believe over the years. This is an intelligent system that we are all a part of, and we all make our entrances and exits precisely on time. This last selection is my message to you as well as my tribute to that all-revealing moment back in early 1989. Be certain of one thing as expressed in A Course in Miracles, and as I have attempted to convey to you here in this final part of the recording. It is the one and only suggestion I personally want to offer you and leave with you as we close. If you knew who walks beside you on the way that you have chosen, fear would be impossible. God bless you.
We hope you've enjoyed this program from Harper Audio. To order additional cassettes or to receive a complete catalog of Harper Audio and Cadman titles, please call us at 1-800-331-3761. That's 1-800-331-3761.